You're reclining now in the marble halls of ancient Rome, where the scent of roasted fowl and wine mingles with whispers of treachery, and every shadow holds secrets that could topple empires. Picture this: October 13th, 54 AD, and Emperor Claudius sits down for his favorite meal, mushrooms prepared by his trusted food taster, the same servant who's protected him from countless assassination attempts. But tonight, something's different. His wife Agrippina watches from across the triclinium as he savors each bite, knowing she's orchestrated the perfect crime with meticulous patience. The mushrooms aren't just seasoned with garum and herbs. They're laced with death itself, each morsel carefully selected by Locusta, Rome's most skilled poisoner. Within hours, the stammering, limping emperor who conquered Britain lies writhing in agony, his scholarly mind racing through symptoms he's read about in Greek medical texts. His physician, Xenophon, secretly in Agrippina's employ, finishes what the mushroom started with a poisoned feather down his throat, ensuring young Nero inherits the throne. The gentle crackling of torches, the soft shuffle of sandaled feet rushing through corridors. The empire's fate sealed with a single meal that transforms history forever. How strange that mushrooms, nature's quiet decomposers, would decompose an empire's very foundation and crown a monster. Hey friends, you're stepping into the Vatican's shadowed halls now, where even God's representative wasn't safe from poison's embrace, and divine justice moves in mysterious, deadly ways. August 18, 1503, and Pope Alexander VI, the Borgia Patriarch himself, sits at Cardinal Adriano Castellasi's villa for what should be a peaceful summer feast away from Rome's stifling heat. The irony cuts deep. Here's a man who'd allegedly poisoned countless enemies using his infamous white powder, now lifting a goblet of Frascati wine to his lips without suspicion or his usual food taster. The wine tastes sweet. The conversation flows about church politics and upcoming appointments. Yet within hours, both host and guest collapse in violent convulsions that echo through the villa's marble halls. Some whisper the cardinal accidentally served his own prepared poison meant for wealthy guests whose fortunes he coveted. Others claim divine justice finally caught the corrupt pontiff who turned the papacy into a family business of murder and nepotism. The soft tolling of church bells across Rome, the gentle weeping of genuinely faithful cardinals who'd hoped for reform, the strange poetry of a poisoner poisoned by his own methods. Cesare Borgia rushes to secure papal treasures while his father writhes in agony. The Vatican's corruption temporarily cleansed by accidental death. Don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying these whispered tales from history's shadows, where power and poison dance eternal waltzes. You find yourself in St. Petersburg's grandest palace now, where December snow muffles the sound of history's strangest assassination and the dying gasps of Imperial Russia. December 30th, 1916, and Prince Felix Yusupov serves tea and pitted fours laced with enough cyanide to kill 10 horses to Grigory Rasputin, the mad monk who's bewitched Tsarina Alexandra with promises of healing her hemophiliac son. Yet Rasputin sits there in the palace's basement, calmly eating poisoned cakes and drinking doctored Madeira, seemingly immune to death's call while discussing mysticism and politics. Frustrated and terrified, the conspirators shoot him point blank. He survives and attacks Felix. They beat him with clubs. He continues breathing and crawling toward the stairs. Finally, they bind his hands and feet, wrap him in a curtain, and throw him through ice into the Neva River, where he somehow lives long enough to free one hand before drowning in the black water. The gentle lapping of dark water against ice, The soft crunch of snow under panicked footsteps, the eerie resilience of a peasant who refused to die easily despite facing poison, bullets, and an icy river. 3 different murder methods in one night, yet each seemed insufficient against this strange holy man who'd convinced the royal family he could save their dynasty. What kind of constitution could withstand poison, bullets, and an icy river all in one evening and still nearly escape? You're walking through the gardens of Nola now, where the scent of ripening figs mingles with imperial secrets and matrimonial malice that's been brewing for decades. August 19th, 14 AD, and 75-year-old Emperor Augustus reaches for fresh figs from his favorite tree during his daily morning walk. The same tree his wife Livia tends with such devoted care, pruning and watering personally despite having dozens of slaves. For months, she's been coating the outer figs with a colorless poison while leaving the inner ones pure, knowing her husband's lifelong habit of picking fruit himself during their peaceful strolls through their villa's gardens. The gentle buzzing of bees among leaves, the soft rustle of silk as Livia approaches with feigned concern. The irony of Rome's first emperor dying from the very domesticity he'd promoted in his moral reforms. As Augustus writhes in his final hours, whispering about seeing his beloved first wife Scribonia in fevered dreams, and asking for fresh figs to ease his burning throat, Livia ensures their adopted son Tiberius receives news just in time to claim power smoothly. The most powerful man in the known world, conqueror of Egypt and Gaul, undone by his trust in garden-fresh fruit and a wife's patient 40-year plan. The sweet scent of overripe figs rotting on marble paths, the sound of servants weeping genuinely, the empire's golden age ending with domestic betrayal. How many other rulers have fallen not to grand conspiracies, but to the quiet patience of those they loved most? Hey friends, dim your lights and imagine the stone corridors of the Tower of London, where 2 young voices grew quieter each day until they vanished entirely from history's pages. Summer 1483, and 12-year-old King Edward V and his 9-year-old brother Richard, Duke of York, wait in their tower apartments, told they're there for their protection and preparation before the coronation ceremony. Their uncle, Richard III, visits less frequently now, his conversations shorter and more strained each time. The boys' servants speak in hushed tones about strange orders from above. Meals arrive irregularly and seem different somehow. And gradually the sound of children playing in the gardens fades to silence like a song ending. No dramatic poison scene here, just a quiet disappearance that haunts English history more than any battlefield death. The soft echo of small footsteps in empty hallways, the gentle closing of heavy doors that seem to lock from outside, the terrible absence where laughter and royal lessons should be. Some whisper about Sir James Tyrrell smothering them with pillows, others about slow poisoning with mercury or arsenic. Centuries later, workers discover small skeletons beneath a tower staircase, but the mystery deepens rather than resolves when scientists examine the bones. 2 princes, rightful heirs to England's throne, simply ceased to exist one August day, allowing their uncle to crown himself king. What's more chilling, a dramatic assassination or the gradual erasure of innocence from history's pages forever? You're standing in the royal chambers of Castile now, where madness and murder dance together in a deadly waltz of power and political convenience. September 1506, and Queen Juana of Castile watches her husband Philip the Handsome collapse during a tennis match at Burgos, his lips turning blue and foam appearing at his mouth after drinking from a silver goblet she'd seen a courtier doctor with white powder moments before. But here's the cruel twist. When Juana screams warnings about poison and names specific suspects, the court dismisses her words as symptoms of her growing madness. the same condition they've been whispering about since her jealous rages over Philip's numerous mistresses. The gentle swish of ballroom gowns, the soft plucking of lute strings that continues even as Philip dies in agony, the terrible isolation of knowing the truth while everyone believes you're insane. Philip's convenient death leaves Juana powerless, allowing her father Ferdinand of Aragon to rule Castile as regent, claiming his daughter is too mad to govern effectively. The sound of keys turning in locks, the whispered conferences outside her chambers between doctors and advisors, the gradual transformation of a queen into a prisoner of her own grief and others' ambitions. She spends 47 years in confinement, always insisting Philip was murdered, never believed, never freed. How many witnesses to murder have been silenced not by death, but by being labeled mad and locked away? You find yourself in Isfahan's Golden Palace now, where Persian carpets muffle footsteps and hashish smoke conceals deadly intentions among the empire's most trusted advisors. September 1666. And 27-year-old Shah Abbas II of Persia collapses during what should have been a routine evening of pleasure, poetry, and political discussion with his inner circle of ministers and military commanders. The court physician whispers about sudden fever and corrupt humors, but the timing seems too convenient. His heir, Safi, is barely 16 and unprepared to rule, while ambitious courtiers circle like hawks, sensing weakness in the empire's defenses, the gentle bubbling of water pipes filled with opium and tobacco, the soft rustle of silk cushions as panic spreads through the harem and news reaches the Queen Mother, the strange coincidence that the Shah's favorite concubine Gulnar and his personal food taster both die within 3 days of mysterious stomach ailments. His mother, the powerful Queen Mother Sakine Khatun, ensures a smooth transition to her grandson, but rumors persist about a goblet of wine shared between grandmother and son during their last private meeting. The sweet scent of jasmine and rosewater in the palace gardens, the quiet chanting of Shia mourners, the empire's gradual decline beginning with this mysterious death that weakens centralized power. The Safavid dynasty never recovers its former strength, eventually falling to Afghan invasions 50 years later. Why do the most powerful empires so often crumble from within, one suspicious death at a time, like flowers rotting from the stem? You're walking through Ludlow Castle's misty courtyards now, where April rain washes away dreams of what might have been and alternate histories die quietly. April 2nd, 1502, and 15-year-old Prince Arthur, Henry VIII's older brother and England's rightful heir, falls ill with a mysterious sweating sickness just 5 months after marrying Catherine of Aragon in Winchester Cathedral's grand ceremony. But whispers in the Welsh borderlands speak of more than disease, mentioning strange visitors to the castle and unusual herbs found in the prince's chambers. The gentle drip of rain on castle stones, the soft weeping of servants who loved the bookish gentle prince who spoke Welsh fluently and treated them kindly, the terrible irony that Arthur's death would reshape English history forever in ways no one could imagine. His younger brother, Henry, never meant to rule and raised for the church, would become the tyrant who broke with Rome, executed 2 wives, and plunged England into religious chaos. Some historians whisper about Spanish agents ensuring Catherine would be free to marry the future king. Others about rival English nobles who preferred the more controllable younger son over Arthur's scholarly independence. The sound of funeral bells across Wales, the quiet return of a young widow to Spain, where she waits to marry again. The alternate timeline where England might have remained Catholic and avoided centuries of religious warfare. What if history's greatest monsters were created not by ambition, but by the mysterious deaths of gentler souls meant to rule? Hey friends, you're entering the Topkapi Palace now, where Turkish coffee and conquest once filled the air with equal intensity and the scent of victory. February 8, 1640, and 27-year-old Sultan Murad IV, the Ottoman Empire's last great military leader, who'd personally led cavalry charges and conquered Baghdad from the Persians, sits celebrating his recent victories with his closest advisors and military commanders in the palace's private chambers. The coffee is sweeter tonight, served in precious Chinese porcelain cups, the conversation more animated as they plan future campaigns against Vienna and Venice. Yet within hours, the Sultan who'd banned alcohol and tobacco throughout his empire lies writhing in agony from what appears to be poisoning. His brother Ibrahim, long considered mad and kept locked away in the palace's infamous cage where royal siblings lived in captivity, suddenly seems much more lucid as news of Murad's death reaches him through the harem network. The gentle splash of fountains in marble courtyards, the soft whisper of silk curtains as power shifts hands, and the Janissaries pledge allegiance, the empire's military expansion ending with a single suspicious cup of coffee that changes everything. The sound of Janissary drums grows quieter, the borders begin to contract, and the age of Ottoman conquest dies with its final warrior sultan who'd restored the empire's military glory after decades of weak rulers. How fitting that an empire built on the sword should end with something as delicate as poisoned coffee served by trusted hands. You're sheltering now in Newark's ancient Swine's Head Abbey, where October storms rage outside and treachery warms itself by holy fires blessed by God. October 19th, 1216, and King John, already weakened by civil war, the humiliation of Magna Carta, and the loss of his French territories, accepts shelter from Cistercian monks during his desperate flight north from rebellious barons and French invaders. The monastery's hospitality seems genuine. The brothers' prayers for his health sound sincere as they chant in Latin, yet the pears and ale they serve with such ceremony taste unusually bitter and leave a strange burning sensation. The gentle patter of rain on monastery roofs, the soft chanting of evening prayers that might mask confession of murder, the irony of England's most hated king dying in God's house among men sworn to charity. Some chronicles whisper that a monk named Simon of Swine's Head poisoned the fruit after the king insulted their simple fare, claiming divine justice demanded action against a tyrant who'd oppressed Holy Church. The sound of church bells tolling across a kingdom, already choosing his 9-year-old son Henry as successor. The soft closing of chronicle books that would paint John as a villain deserving death for his cruelty and impiety. A tyrant king's last meal, served by those sworn to feed the hungry and shelter the homeless in Christ's name. His death ends the civil war but begins a minority regency that weakens royal power for decades, which deaths serve justice, and which create the very chaos they claim to prevent in God's mysterious plan. You're entering the Louvre's shadowed corridors now, where Italian perfumery mingles with French court intrigue, and power wears a feminine face. 1574, and 20-year-old King Charles IX of France lies dying in agony, blood flowing from every orifice while his mother, Catherine de' Medici, maintains her vigil beside his bed. But whispers speak of more than tuberculosis. They mention the scented gloves she'd given him months earlier, treated with her personal perfumer's special oils, the gentle rustle of silk gowns, the soft chanting of priests administering last rites, the terrible irony that a mother's gift might be her son's doom. Catherine had ruled France through 3 weak sons, but Charles had begun asserting independence, threatening her control over policy and religion, the sweet scent of poisoned leather lingering in royal chambers, the quiet shuffling of courtiers who remember other mysterious deaths during her regency. the dynasty's gradual weakening under a queen mother's iron grip disguised as maternal devotion. How many rulers have fallen to the gentle touch of those who claimed to love them most protectively? Dear listeners, you're stepping into Rome's imperial bathhouse now, where marble echoes with splashing water and the final gasps of a mad emperor. December 31st, 192 AD, and Emperor Commodus, who believed himself Hercules reborn and fought as a gladiator in the Colosseum, prepares for his evening bath after a day of public spectacles. His wrestling partner Narcissus, a freed slave who'd gained the emperor's trust through physical prowess, helps him into the warm water as usual. But tonight, strong hands close around the imperial throat beneath the surface, ending the reign of Rome's most deranged ruler. The gentle lapping of bathwater against marble, the soft echo of struggle in steamy chambers, the empire's relief as news spreads through whispered conversations. His concubine Marcia and Chamberlain Eclectus had orchestrated the plot, knowing Commodus planned to execute them on New Year's Day. The sound of water draining away, the quiet celebration among senators who'd survived his paranoid purges, the Antonine dynasty ending in a bathroom where even gods could drown. What poetic justice that a man who glorified violence should meet his end in such intimate, watery silence. You find yourself in Berkeley Castle's cold stone chambers, where September mist carries screams that history barely dares to record. September 21st, 1327, and King Edward II of England, deposed by his own wife Isabella and her lover Roger Mortimer, faces his final night in captivity. The queen, who'd been humiliated by her husband's male favorites, now watches from afar as her revenge unfolds. The method is deliberately chosen for its cruelty, a red-hot poker thrust into places that leave no external marks, ensuring the death appears natural. The gentle drip of dungeon condensation, the soft weeping of guards who must participate, the terrible precision of a murder designed to look like illness. Isabella's transformation from ignored wife to vengeful she-wolf reshapes English politics, but her son, Edward III, will eventually turn against her, executing Mortimer and confining his mother to comfortable exile. The sound of keys turning in castle locks, the quiet return of a queen mother to powerless retirement, the dynasty's continuation through matricide that history tries to forget. How often do the wronged become more terrible than those who wronged them in their quest for justice? Hey friends, you're entering Isfahan's perfumed gardens now, where Persian roses bloom beside political plots and empire's foundations crack slowly. May 14th, 1576, and 53-year-old Shah Tahmasp of Persia, who'd ruled for over 50 years and made Iran a major power, begins experiencing strange symptoms after his daily rose sherbet. The court physician speaks of natural decline, but the timing coincides suspiciously with succession disputes among his sons. His eldest son Ismail, kept prisoner for 20 years due to his violent nature, suddenly seems more favored by certain court factions. The gentle buzzing of bees in royal gardens, the soft splash of fountains that might mask private conversations, the gradual weakening of a ruler who'd defeated Ottoman invasions and Portuguese encroachment. Some whisper about mercury in his drinks, others about slow arsenic administered through his beloved sweets, the sweet scent of dying roses, the quiet redistribution of power among rival princes, the empire's slow decline beginning with this mysterious illness that transforms strength into weakness over months. Why do the longest reigns often end with the slowest deaths, as if time itself turns poisonous? You're standing in the Kremlin's Red Square now, where May snow mingles with revolutionary blood and pretenders learn the cost of claiming thrones. May 17th, 1606. and the man claiming to be Prince Dmitri, supposedly the rightful heir to Ivan the Terrible, lies dead in Moscow's palace courtyard, his Polish wife fleeing for her life. But was this really the lost prince, or merely an impostor named Grigory Otrepiev who'd convinced half of Russia to follow him? The gentle tolling of church bells, the soft murmur of crowds who'd believed in his legitimacy, the terrible uncertainty that death brings no resolution to. His reign lasted barely a year before boyar conspirators led by Prince Shuisky stormed the palace and threw his body from the walls. The sound of breaking glass as rioters destroy Polish symbols, the quiet prayers of monks who'd supported the false czar, the time of troubles deepening as competing claimants emerge. His mysterious death, whether by defenestration or stabbing, ends one pretense, but begins a decade of civil war that nearly destroys the Russian state entirely. How many thrones have been lost not to legitimate heirs, but to the power of belief in royal blood? Dear listeners, you're entering Ferrara's ducal palace now, where Renaissance art conceals family secrets and beauty masks deadly knowledge. June 24, 1519, and 39-year-old Lucrezia Borgia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI and sister to Cesare, dies in childbirth after mysterious complications that court physicians can't explain. But whispers suggest something more sinister than natural causes affected the woman who'd survived multiple marriages and countless assassination attempts. Her husband, Duke Alfonso d'Este, had grown suspicious of her correspondence with former lovers and political allies, particularly letters that arrived in coded Latin. The gentle rustle of silk bed curtains, the soft weeping of ladies-in-waiting who knew her secrets, the irony that Europe's most notorious poisoner might have been poisoned herself. Some chronicles mention strange herbs found in her private chambers. Others speak of mercury treatments that seemed unusually aggressive. The sweet scent of perfumed death lingers, the quiet destruction of her personal papers, the Este dynasty's relief at removing a wife whose family connections had become politically dangerous rather than advantageous. What justice exists when those who live by poison might die by the same cruel chemistry? You find yourself in Urbichus Castle's drafty halls now, where Swedish winter winds carry madness and mercury through ancient stones. February 26, 1577, and the deposed King Eric XIV of Sweden, driven insane by paranoia and confined by his brother King John III, accepts his final bowl of pea soup from a servant he trusts. But the soup tastes different tonight, metallic and bitter, as if seasoned with something more dangerous than salt. His brother had grown tired of political complications caused by Eric's imprisonment and the constant threat of restoration attempts by loyalist nobles, the gentle crackling of fireplace logs, the soft shuffling of guards who've watched madness consume a once brilliant king, the terrible mercy of ending suffering that has lasted for years. Eric's transformation from Renaissance prince who spoke multiple languages and patronized arts into a raving madman haunts Swedish consciousness. The sound of wind through castle battlements, the quiet relief among courtiers who feared his potential restoration, the Vasa dynasty's dark turn toward fraternal murder that establishes precedent for future succession crises. How thin the line between treating madness and causing death when mercy and murder wear identical faces. You're walking through the Forbidden City's golden courtyards now, where November frost kills chrysanthemums and dynasties die quietly. November 14th, 1908, and 37-year-old Emperor Guangxu of China, puppet ruler controlled by his aunt, the Empress Dowager Cixi, dies mysteriously just one day before her own death. The timing seems impossibly convenient, as if coordinated by forces beyond mortal understanding. His death from sudden stomach illness comes exactly when reform movements threatened Cixi's conservative control over imperial policy. The gentle tinkle of wind chimes in empty courtyards, the soft weeping of eunuchs who served both rulers, the end of 4,000 years of imperial tradition hidden in palace medical reports. Modern forensic analysis reveals massive arsenic poisoning, but whether administered by Sixie's agents or rival court factions remains unclear. The sweet scent of incense burning for two imperial souls, the quiet revolution beginning as republican ideas spread, the Qing dynasty's final collapse accelerated by this double death that leaves China rudderless in a changing world. How fitting that empires spanning millennia should end with poison administered in porcelain bowls by trembling hands. You're entering Constantinople's imperial chapel now, where theological debates turn deadly and communion wine carries more than salvation. August 378 AD, and Emperor Valens, who'd spent his reign promoting Arian Christianity against Orthodox opposition, receives communion from his personal chaplain during morning mass. But the consecrated wine contains a slow-acting poison that kills him within days. His death eliminates the Eastern Empire's most controversial religious leader and allows Orthodox restoration. The gentle chanting of Arian prayers, soon to be silenced forever. The soft conspiracy among Orthodox bishops who'd waited years for this opportunity. The empire's theological transformation, beginning with this sacrilegious murder disguised as holy sacrament. His elimination removes the last imperial patron of Arianism, ensuring Nicene Christianity's complete triumph throughout the Roman world. The sweet taste of poisoned wine lingering on imperial lips. The quiet celebration among Orthodox clergy emerging from persecution, the dynasty's survival requiring abandonment of heretical policies that had divided Christian communities for decades. What price do empires pay when theological disputes become literally matters of life and death in sacred spaces? You're entering Constantinople's family dining hall now, where November warmth cannot protect the imperial family from the poison hidden in their Sunday feast. 602 AD, and Emperor Maurice, who'd restored the eastern frontier through military genius but alienated the army through fiscal austerity, dines with his wife and children when servants notice their evening wine has an unusual bitter aftertaste that burns the throat. His death, along with his entire family, eliminates the Justinian dynasty and allows focus to seize power through military coup. The gentle laughter of imperial children sharing their final meal. The soft horror of palace servants who realize they've served poison to the entire royal family. The empire's constitutional crisis as news spreads that their capable ruler and all heirs have fallen simultaneously. His elimination represents the ultimate family murder, showing how unpopular policies can lead to complete dynastic extinction through coordinated poisoning. The sweet taste of family dinner turning to collective death. The quiet triumph of military factions who'd opposed imperial fiscal policies. The dynasty's complete extinction ensuring no heir survives to challenge usurpation. How many dynasties have discovered that their most successful rulers become targets for elimination that extends to entire families when political opposition seeks permanent solutions? You're entering Constantinople's imperial nursery now, where September heat intensifies the fever that claims Byzantium's youngest emperor. 1183 AD, and 12-year-old Emperor Alexios II, who'd inherited the throne under his mother's regency, but faced growing opposition from his cousin Andronikos, who coveted imperial power, dies suddenly from what court physicians describe as stomach illness, though palace servants whisper about suspicious powders added to his daily milk by those eager to end the minority rule. His death eliminates the last obstacle to Andronikos's usurpation and triggers the bloodiest period in Byzantine court history, The gentle lullabies that once soothed imperial sleep falling silent forever. The soft weeping of nurses who'd watched their charge fade from healthy child to mysterious invalid. The empire's innocence lost as news spreads that even children aren't safe from palace conspiracy. His elimination allows Andronikos to claim the throne and begin systematic persecution of the aristocratic families who'd supported the legitimate heir. The sweet scent of poisoned milk lingering in royal chambers. The quiet horror among courtiers who realize childhood offers no protection from imperial ambition, the dynasty's survival requiring the murder of its own future to satisfy adult political desires. How many empires have discovered that even child emperors pose threats to ambitious relatives seeking power through any means necessary? Dear listeners, you're stepping into Rome's Palatine Hill now, where January rain washes imperial blood from marble steps and madness meets its match. January 24th, 41 AD, and Emperor Caligula, who declared himself a living god and made his horse a consul, leaves the theater after watching Greek plays, his mood unusually cheerful, despite mounting conspiracies. But Praetorian Guard officer Cassius Chaerea waits in the palace corridor, driven beyond endurance by the emperor's humiliating nicknames and sexual abuse. A single sword thrust to the neck, followed by 30 more wounds from fellow conspirators, ends 4 years of insane tyranny that bankrupted the empire and terrorized the Senate. The gentle echo of theatrical applause fading in the distance. The soft splash of blood on cold marble. The immediate relief spreading through Rome as news reaches the Forum. His wife Caesonia and infant daughter Drusilla die within hours, ensuring no heir survives to continue the madness. The sound of senators emerging from hiding. The quiet destruction of Caligula's divine statues. The empire's narrow escape from complete collapse under a lunatic's rule. What transforms loyal guards into assassins, and when does duty to empire override duty to emperor? You're finding yourself in Léon-la-Forêt's hunting lodge now, where December mist carries the scent of forbidden delicacies and dynastic disaster that reshapes English succession forever. December 1st, 1135, and King Henry VIII of England, conqueror of Normandy and father of modern English law who'd ruled for 35 years with iron discipline, ignores his physician's warnings and feasts on lampreys, the eel-like fish his doctors have forbidden due to his advancing age and known digestive problems. But some whisper this meal was no accident of royal gluttony, but carefully orchestrated by those who knew his weakness for the delicacy would prove fatal given his medical condition. The gentle crackling of lodge fires warming Norman nobles. The soft laughter of hunting companions, unaware they're witnessing history's pivot point. The terrible irony that England's most organized king dies from lack of self-control over culinary temptation. His death without a male heir triggers 20 years of civil war between his daughter Matilda and nephew Stephen, fracturing the Anglo-Norman realm he'd spent decades building through careful diplomacy and military conquest. How many empires have fallen because their builders couldn't resist the very pleasures they could afford least in moments of triumph? Hey friends, you're entering Ropsha Palace's isolated chambers now, where July heat intensifies political pressure and brief rains end violently. July 17th, 1762, and Tsar Peter III of Russia, who'd ruled for barely 6 months and alienated everyone from the army to the church, faces house arrest after his wife Catherine's successful coup. His guards, led by Alexei Orlov, claim he died during a drunken quarrel, but the timing seems suspiciously convenient for the new Empress Catherine II. The gentle buzz of summer flies through palace windows, the soft murmur of guards who must explain a mysterious death, the transformation of a brief imperial experiment into historical footnote. Peter's pro-Prussian policies and contempt for Russian traditions had made him universally hated, but his sudden death allows Catherine to consolidate power without the complication of a living predecessor. The sound of documents being destroyed, the quiet rewriting of official records, the German princess's complete triumph over the husband she'd learned to despise during 18 years of loveless marriage. What happens when empires decide their emperors are more dangerous alive than dead to everyone's future? You're walking through Topkapi Palace's golden corridors now, where August heat mingles with incense and imperial madness finally meets its limit. August 18, 1648, and Sultan Ibrahim of the Ottoman Empire, known as Ibrahim the Mad for his extravagant cruelties and bizarre obsessions, faces a silk bowstring around his neck, administered by palace executioners on orders from his own mother, Kusum Sultan. His 9 years of rule had bankrupted the empire through massive construction projects and gifts to favorites, while his paranoid executions of capable administrators weakened Ottoman defenses against European enemies. The gentle whisper of silk tightening, the soft prayers of eunuchs who witnessed too many imperial horrors, the dynasty's desperate attempt to save itself from complete collapse. His mother's decision to order her son's execution represents the ultimate triumph of state survival over maternal love in Ottoman politics. The sweet scent of rosewater used to cleanse royal corpses, the quiet installation of his 6-year-old son, Mehmed IV, the empire's gradual recovery under new leadership that prioritizes competence over imperial whims. When does madness become so dangerous that even mothers must choose empire over blood to save civilization? Dear listeners, you're entering Oxford's royal lodgings now, where November darkness conceals the most intimate and shameful of all royal assassinations. November 30th, 1016, and King Edmund Ironside, who'd fought Viking invasions and divided England with Canute through skillful negotiation, sits in his private privy, believing himself safe in the most personal of moments. But Edric Striona, the treacherous Earl of Mercia who'd betrayed multiple kings, has positioned an assassin beneath the wooden seat with a sharp iron spike. The gentle drip of autumn rain on castle walls, the soft rustle of clothing in enclosed spaces, the ultimate violation of royal dignity through attack in humanity's most vulnerable moment. Edmund's death eliminates the last obstacle to complete Danish conquest of England, allowing Canute to become sole ruler and establishing Scandinavian control that lasts for decades. The sound of servants discovering their king's body, the quiet horror spreading through a court that thought they'd found peace, the dynasty's end in circumstances too shameful for chroniclers to describe in detail. What kind of desperation drives assassins to strike in places where even kings must be utterly defenseless? You find yourself in Serdica's imperial palace now, where spring air carries the scent of persecution's end and divine justice's strange timing. May 5th, 311 AD, and Emperor Galerius, chief architect of Christianity's great persecution, lies dying from a mysterious wasting disease that rots his flesh while keeping his mind terrifyingly clear. His final act before death is issuing the Edict of Toleration, officially ending the systematic murder of Christians throughout the empire. The gentle chanting of newly legal Christian prayers, the soft weeping of those who suffered under his persecution, the irony that the persecutor becomes the liberator through approaching death. Some see divine retribution in his horrible suffering. Others recognize political calculation as he realizes persecution has failed to destroy the faith. The sweet incense of Thanksgiving services, the quiet emergence of hidden Christians from decades of terror, the empire's religious transformation beginning with one man's agonizing recognition of defeat. His death marks the end of pagan imperial resistance to Christianity's growth. How often do history's greatest changes come not from conversion of hearts, but from exhaustion of alternatives? You're entering Meyerling's hunting lodge now, where January snow muffles the Habsburg dynasty's darkest secret, and love meets politics in deadly embrace. January 30th, 1889. And Crown Prince Rudolph of Austria-Hungary, heir to the dual monarchy and liberal hope for the empire's future, dies alongside his 17-year-old mistress, Baroness Mary Vetsera, in circumstances the court desperately tries to conceal. The official story claims suicide driven by mental illness, but witnesses speak of mysterious visitors and political meetings in the days before his death, the gentle crackling of lodge fires, the soft weeping of servants who discover two bodies, the empire's carefully constructed cover-up that hides evidence and silences witnesses. Rudolph's liberal politics and criticism of his father's conservative policies had made him enemies among court reactionaries and foreign intelligence services. The sound of sleigh bells carrying official investigators, the quiet destruction of compromising documents, the Austro-Hungarian Empire's slow decline accelerating without its most capable heir to guide modernization efforts. What transforms family hunting lodges into tombs where empires lose their futures to mysterious deaths? Hey friends, you're traveling through Mesopotamian desert now, where February wines carry imperial ambitions and mysterious vapors that kill emperors. February 17th, 364 AD, and Emperor Jovian, who'd negotiated Rome's humiliating peace with Persia and restored Christianity as the empire's religion, retires to his purple tent after a day of difficult marching through hostile territory. But by morning, the 33-year-old emperor lies dead from what court physicians claim was accidental suffocation by charcoal fumes from his tent's heating brazier. The gentle flapping of silk tent walls in desert wind, the soft murmur of legions who discover their leader's mysterious death, the empire's precarious position in enemy territory without imperial leadership. Some whisper about Persian agents infiltrating the camp, others about Christian or pagan factions settling scores through assassination. The sweet scent of desert herbs carried on morning breezes, the quiet panic among generals who must choose a successor in dangerous circumstances, the empire's eastward retreat continuing under new leadership that abandons Jovian's aggressive policies. How many expeditions have ended not in battlefield defeat, but in tent flaps that close forever on imperial dreams? You're entering Madagascar's royal palace now, where August heat shimmers with political intrigue and 40 years of absolute rule finally face their end. August 16th, 1861, and Queen Ranavalona Wires of Madagascar, who'd killed over 100,000 subjects through wars, forced labor, and religious persecution while keeping European colonizers at bay through pure terror, collapses during a royal celebration after drinking from her ceremonial goblet. Her death comes suspiciously soon after her son Rakoto begins questioning her isolationist policies and brutal methods of maintaining independence. The gentle rhythm of traditional drums, the soft gasps of courtiers who witness their fearsome queen's sudden weakness, the island kingdom's relief mixed with uncertainty about the future. Some speak of poison administered by French agents seeking to open Madagascar to colonial influence. Others whisper about court conspiracies led by her own heir. The sweet scent of tropical flowers carried through palace windows. The quiet celebrations in villages that survived her reign of terror. The dynasty's survival under her son's more moderate rule that ultimately fails to prevent French colonization. How do islands of independence finally fall? Through external conquest or internal exhaustion with the costs of isolation. You're entering Tortona's modest palace now, where August heat carries the scent of the Western Empire's last hope dying at a dinner table. 461 AD, and Emperor Majorian, who'd restored Roman military power through successful campaigns against Vandals and Visigoths, but alienated powerful senators through his reforms, dies suddenly after a feast with Ricimer, his Germanic general, when the wine tastes unusually bitter and burns his throat. His death eliminates the last Western emperor capable of genuine restoration and ensures barbarian control over Roman territories. The gentle echo of military victories that will never be repeated. The soft prayers of Roman citizens who'd hoped for imperial revival, the empire's final opportunity lost as news spreads that their capable ruler has fallen to suspicious circumstances. His elimination removes the obstacle to Ricimer's puppet emperor policy, allowing Germanic control over imperial succession without the inconvenience of competent Roman leadership. The sweet taste of celebration wine turning deadly in royal mouth. The quiet satisfaction among barbarian kingmakers who'd waited for this opportunity. The empire's effective end disguised as a peaceful dinner between allies who'd grown too dangerous to each other. How many dying empires have lost their final chance for restoration to the poison served by those meant to be their strongest defenders? Dear listeners, you're entering Pontefract Castle's cold stone chambers now, where February winds carry the last Plantagenet's dying breath. February 14th, 1400, and King Richard II of England, deposed by his cousin Henry Bolingbroke and imprisoned in Yorkshire's most remote fortress, slowly wastes away from what appears to be voluntary starvation. Though whispers speak of more sinister causes, his death comes conveniently just as plots emerge to restore him to the throne, making Henry IV's reign more secure. The gentle drip of winter rain through castle walls, the soft prayers of loyal servants who watch their king fade, the kingdom's transformation as medieval kingship gives way to parliamentary oversight. Some chroniclers claim Richard starved himself from despair. Others whisper about enforced starvation disguised as suicide to avoid regicide charges. The sound of keys turning in dungeon locks, the quiet burial in an unmarked grave, the dynasty's violent end that establishes precedent for deposing kings who claim absolute divine authority over increasingly assertive nobility. What drives kings to choose death over captivity, and when does royal pride become more dangerous than royal power? You find yourself in Ctesiphon's Persian palace now, where desert heat amplifies the ultimate degradation of Roman imperial dignity. 260 A.D., and Emperor Valerian, captured during disastrous negotiations with Sasanian King Shapur I, serves as a human footstool for his captor, forced to kneel so the Persian king can mount his horse using the Roman emperor's back. His eventual death in captivity, possibly from poison administered as a mercy, represents Rome's lowest point in foreign relations. The gentle rustle of silk Persian robes, the soft humiliation echoing through palace courtyards, the empire's eastern frontier collapsing as news of imperial captivity spreads. His son Gallienus rules the Western Empire, while his father faces daily degradation in Persia, creating unprecedented constitutional crisis about divided imperial authority. The sweet scent of Persian incense masking Roman decay. The quiet celebration among Rome's enemies who witness imperial vulnerability, the empire's slow recovery, requiring decades of military reforms to restore eastern defenses against renewed Persian aggression. How many empires have learned that captive emperors become symbols of weakness that destroy legitimacy across vast territories? You're entering Studios Monastery's quiet cells now, where November prayers cannot protect former emperors from the reach of imperial politics. 1061 A.D., and former Emperor Isaac I Komnenos, who'd abdicated to become a monk but retained influence that worried his successor Constantine X, dies suddenly during evening prayers when his wine contains substances that monastery physicians cannot identify or treat. His death eliminates the military alternative that threatened civilian imperial rule. The gentle chanting of monastic prayers that couldn't preserve imperial life, the soft horror among monks who'd believed religious sanctuary would protect former rulers, the empire's realization that even abdication offers no safety from palace conspiracy. His elimination removes the popular general whose return to power remained possible while he lived, ensuring Constantine X's dynasty faces no military challenges from charismatic predecessors. The sweet taste of communion wine turning bitter with poison. The quiet relief among courtiers who'd feared Isaac's potential restoration. The monastery's sanctity violated by political murder that proves nowhere is safe from imperial ambition. What sanctuary exists for former emperors when their continued existence threatens the legitimacy of those who've inherited their thrones? You're entering Constantinople's imperial library now, where December cold preserves the moment when Byzantine learning dies with its greatest patron, 1354 A.D., and Emperor John VIII Cantacuzene, who'd gained power through civil war but devoted himself to theological scholarship and historical writing while the empire crumbled around him, dies suddenly while working on his memoirs, his wine cup containing residue that palace chemists later identify as mercury poisoning. His death eliminates the last emperor who prioritized intellectual pursuits over military necessity. The gentle scratching of imperial quills writing final historical observations. The soft rustling of manuscript pages describing ceremonies that will never again be performed. The empire's cultural memory ending with this mysterious death in scholarly solitude. His elimination allows more practical rulers to focus on territorial survival rather than academic pursuits, but removes the institutional memory that had preserved Byzantine governmental traditions. The sweet scent of illuminated manuscripts drying around imperial corpse, the quiet relief among military commanders who'd opposed scholarly rule, the dynasty's intellectual legacy poisoned along with its creator, who'd chosen books over battles. What price do empires pay when their most learned rulers become too dangerous to those who prefer action over contemplation? Dear listeners, you're entering Constantinople's great palace now, where August heat intensifies family hatred and Byzantine politics reach murderous depths. August 15th, 797 A.D., and 27-year-old Emperor Constantine VI faces his mother Irene's final solution to their power struggle, imperial blinding that transforms him from ruler to political nonentity. The bronze instruments, heated red hot, destroy his eyes so thoroughly that he dies from shock and infection within days, allowing Irene to become the first woman to rule Byzantium in her own right. The gentle chanting of palace priests who bless imperial violence, the soft weeping of eunuchs who witness maternal cruelty, the empire's constitutional crisis as gender roles collapse under political necessity. His death eliminates the last obstacle to Irene's sole rule, but her unprecedented female authority creates legitimacy problems that weaken Byzantine defenses against emerging threats. The sweet incense masking the smell of burned flesh, the quiet horror among courtiers who realize familial bonds mean nothing in imperial politics. The dynasty's survival requiring matricide that future emperors remember as both precedent and warning. What kind of desperation drives mothers to murder sons, and when does imperial survival override every human instinct? You find yourself in Roskilde's royal chambers now, where November darkness conceals the price of holy wars fought for worldly gain. November 12th, 1202, and King Canute VI of Denmark, who'd spent his reign launching crusades against pagan Slavs while building a powerful Baltic empire, collapses during a feast celebrating recent victories, his body racked with symptoms that court physicians cannot explain or treat. His death at 32, just as Denmark reaches its medieval peak, triggers succession disputes that fragment the kingdom's carefully constructed dominance over northern European trade routes. The gentle lapping of fjord waters against royal halls, the soft prayers for a king who'd claimed divine mandate for conquest. The irony that a crusader king dies mysteriously just as his holy wars achieve their goals. Some whisper about Slavic shamans cursing their conqueror, others about political enemies using exotic poisons acquired through Mediterranean trade connections. The sweet scent of victory feasts turning to funeral preparations, the quiet emergence of rival claimants, the kingdom's gradual decline as civil war replaces foreign conquest. How many kingdoms built on holy war have discovered that divine favor expires exactly when earthly success seems most secure? You're entering Hagia Sophia's shadowed nave now, where October candlelight illuminates the final desperate attempts to save a dying empire through religious compromise. October 31st, 1448, and Emperor John VIII, Palaiologos, who'd traveled to Florence seeking Catholic aid against Ottoman expansion and controversially agreed to church reunion, dies suddenly after returning to Constantinople, his body showing signs of poisoning that court physicians attribute to divine punishment for betraying orthodoxy. His death removes the emperor most willing to compromise with Western Christianity, allowing Orthodox hardliners to reject Catholic military aid even as Turkish armies surround the city. The gentle echo of prayers in Greek and Latin, the soft weeping of clergy who fear both heresy and conquest, the empire's final years beginning with this mysterious death that dooms any hope of Western rescue. His brother Constantine XI inherits a throne stripped of viable survival strategies, facing inevitable siege without foreign allies. The sweet incense of Orthodox services resuming traditional forms, the quiet abandonment of union negotiations, the Byzantine Empire's last 5 years sealed by this suspicious death that preserves religious purity while ensuring political destruction. What price do empires pay when theological correctness becomes more important than physical survival in a hostile world? Hey friends, you're entering Prague Castle's heated bath chambers now, where August steam conceals the Holy Roman Empire's most ignominious royal death. August 16, 1419, and King Wenceslaus IV of Bohemia, who'd lost his imperial title to rival claimants but retained his hereditary Czech crown, suffers a fatal stroke while bathing, triggered by hearing news of Prague's Hussite defenestration that throws Catholic counselors from City Hall windows. His death from shock at religious revolution transformed Central European politics, leaving Bohemia without royal leadership just as Protestant Reformation challenges Catholic authority. The gentle splash of bathwater turning cold, the soft panic of servants who discover their king's sudden collapse, the kingdom's descent into religious civil war accelerated by this untimely death. His brother Sigismund, Holy Roman Emperor, inherits claims to Bohemia, but faces decades of Hussite resistance that revolutionizes medieval warfare and religious authority. The sound of church bells tolling across Prague, the quiet emergence of religious radicals from hiding, the dynasty's loss of effective control over territories that become laboratories for Protestant experimentation. How many kingdoms have fallen not to foreign conquest, but to the simple shock of realizing their world has changed forever? You're entering Constantinople's medical chambers now, where March treatments for imperial gout become the perfect cover for dynastic assassination. 1081 AD, and Emperor Nicephorus III, who'd gained power through rebellion against Michael VII, but proved incapable of handling military or economic crises, dies during routine medical treatment when his physician administers herbal remedies laced with concentrated mercury that causes immediate convulsions. His death allows Alexios Komnenos to claim the throne and begin Byzantine military revival. the gentle grinding of medicinal herbs that contain more than healing, the soft prayers of palace physicians who'd failed to detect poisoning, the empire's relief as news spreads that their incompetent ruler has fallen to suspicious medical circumstances. His elimination removes the obstacle to military restoration under competent leadership, ending 3 years of governmental drift that had weakened imperial defenses. The sweet scent of healing herbs masking deadly poison, the quiet satisfaction among military commanders who'd waited for this opportunity, the dynasty's brief existence ending through medical murder that allows institutional recovery. What irony that rulers seeking medical relief from the stress of incompetent government often find only the greater relief of death administered by those demanding better leadership. You're entering the Domus Flavia's private chambers now, where September shadows conceal the assassination that ends the Flavian dynasty's reign of terror. September 18th, 96 AD, and Emperor Domitian, who'd ruled Rome through paranoid purges that eliminated senators, generals, and even family members, faces his final betrayal from those closest to him. His wife Domitia Longina, Chamberlain Parthenius, and steward Stephanus coordinate the plot that places a dagger in the emperor's back during what appears to be a routine administrative meeting. The gentle rustle of silk curtains hiding armed conspirators, the soft whisper of final prayers before imperial murder, the empire's collective relief as news spreads that the tyrant who declared himself a living god lies dead. His assassination represents the triumph of palace conspiracy over imperial paranoia, proving that even the most suspicious rulers cannot watch everyone simultaneously. The sweet scent of freedom returning to senatorial chambers, the quiet emergence of moderates from hiding, the dynasty's end opening Rome to the peaceful reigns of Nerva and Trajan that established the empire's golden age. How many tyrants have discovered that absolute surveillance creates the very conspiracies it seeks to prevent? Dear listeners, you're stepping onto medieval France's first tennis court now, where June heat and royal exertion combine in deadly fashion. June 5th, 1316, and King Louis X of France, known as Louis the Quarrelsome for his conflicts with nobles and unsuccessful military campaigns, collapses after an exhausting game of jeu de paume, the predecessor to modern tennis. He drinks cold wine to cool his overheated body, then dies within hours from what court physicians claim is pneumonia, though whispers suggest poison administered during his vulnerable moment. His death, after barely 2 years of rule, triggers a succession crisis that leads to the extinction of the direct Capetian line within 14 years. The gentle echo of leather balls against stone walls, the soft gasps of courtiers watching their king's sudden illness, the kingdom's instability beginning with this recreational death that seems too convenient for numerous enemies. His infant son John, birth dies within days, allowing his brother Philip V to claim the throne and establish the precedent that excludes women from French succession through the later invented Salic law. What irony that a king called Quarrelsome should die during the one peaceful activity that brought him joy. You find yourself in Constantinople's great palace now, where January cold mingles with political betrayal and the Fourth Crusade's devastating consequences. January 8th, 1204, and Emperor Alexios IV, who'd promised the Crusaders enormous payments for restoring him to the Byzantine throne, faces strangling by his own cousin Alexius V Ducas after failing to deliver the promised gold. His death represents the ultimate failure of medieval diplomacy, as unpaid crusaders turned their armies against Constantinople itself rather than continue to the Holy Land. The gentle lapping of golden horn waters against palace walls, the soft weeping of citizens who realize their city faces Western conquest, the empire's final months beginning with this family murder that eliminates any hope of negotiating with Latin Christians. His broken promises and violent death provide the Crusaders with justification for the sack of Constantinople that destroys Byzantine power for generations. The sweet incense of Orthodox prayers for a doomed city, the quiet packing of treasures by fleeing nobles, the empire's thousand-year survival ending through this combination of political naivety and familial treachery. How many cities have fallen not to foreign enemies, but to the domestic chaos that makes resistance impossible? Hey friends, you're entering Jedburgh Abbey's infirmary now, where December frost carries the last breath of Scotland's Virgin King. December 9th, 1165, and 24-year-old King Malcolm IV of Scotland, known as Malcolm the Maiden for his refusal to marry or produce heirs, dies suddenly during a visit to the border abbey, his body showing symptoms that puzzle medieval physicians. His death without issue transfers the crown to his brother William, fundamentally altering Scottish royal succession and ending the direct line of his grandfather David V. The gentle chanting of monks administering last rites, the soft concern of courtiers who'd pressured him to marry, the kingdom's relief mixed with uncertainty about future stability. Some chronicles hint at poisoning by those frustrated with his celibacy and weak foreign policy. Others suggest divine punishment for his failure to fulfill royal duty through marriage and procreation. The sweet scent of monastery herbs that couldn't save royal life, the quiet emergence of his brother from political obscurity, the dynasty's continuation through fraternal succession that establishes new precedents for Scottish royal inheritance. What price do kingdoms pay when kings choose personal virtue over dynastic responsibility in violent ages? You're walking through Constantinople's dungeon chambers now, where 8 years of darkness end in brief restoration and quick death. April 1st, 1204, and Emperor Isaac II, Angelus, blinded and imprisoned by his brother Alexios III in 1195, experiences miraculous restoration to the throne alongside his son Alexios IV, only to die within months under suspicious circumstances that court physicians attribute to the shock of sudden freedom. His brief return to power during the Fourth Crusade's occupation of Constantinople represents Byzantium's desperate attempt to find legitimate leadership during existential crisis. The gentle sound of chains being removed from imperial wrists, the soft weeping of a man who'd lost 8 years to fraternal ambition, the empire's final constitutional confusion as blind emperors claim authority they cannot effectively exercise. His death eliminates one claimant during the chaotic period when multiple Angelo's family members compete for imperial title while crusader armies control the capital. The sweet relief of ending suffering that had lasted nearly a decade. The quiet recognition that restoration sometimes comes too late. The dynasty's internal conflicts accelerating external conquest. How often do the restored become more dangerous to their restorers than the enemies they were meant to oppose? Dear listeners, you're entering the Tower of London's Wakefield Tower now, where May darkness conceals the Wars of the Rose's most controversial killing. May 21st, 1471, and King Henry VI of England, who'd lost his throne twice to Edward IV and suffered from periodic bouts of complete mental incapacity, dies in his Tower prison on the same night that Edward IV returns to London after decisive victory at Tewkesbury. Official records claim natural death, but the timing suggests murder ordered to prevent future Lancastrian restoration attempts. His death ends the direct Lancastrian line and eliminates the last obstacle to Yorkist consolidation of power, though it creates the martyr status that later supports Henry Tudor's claims. The gentle tolling of tower bells for evening prayers, the soft footsteps of guards who know more than they'll ever reveal, the kingdom's weary acceptance that civil war requires decisive elimination of rival claimants. Some chronicles whisper about pillow suffocation, others mention poison, but all agree that Henry's piety couldn't protect him from political necessity. What transforms anointed kings into inconvenient prisoners whose continued existence threatens the peace their deaths might bring? You're finding yourself in Ankara's aftermath now, where summer heat amplifies the ultimate humiliation of Ottoman imperial dignity and the price of military overconfidence. March 8th, 1403, and Sultan Bayezid I, called the Thunderbolt for his rapid conquests across Anatolia and the Balkans, but captured by Tamerlane at the Battle of Ankara after underestimating Mongol military capabilities, dies in captivity after months of being displayed in an iron cage as a trophy of Mongol victory over Ottoman expansion. His death from what appears to be apoplexy, triggered by constant humiliation, represents the Ottoman Empire's lowest point before its eventual recovery under his surviving sons. The gentle creaking of iron bars that contained imperial ambition, the soft murmur of prayers in Turkish and Persian echoing through Mongol camps, the empire's near dissolution as his sons fight civil war while their father faces daily degradation before enemy audiences. His capture and caged exhibition destroys Ottoman prestige across the Islamic world, encouraging rebellions in recently conquered territories and European counterattacks against weakened frontiers that had seemed permanently secured. The sweet scent of steppe grass carrying news of Mongol victory across Anatolia, the quiet celebrations among Byzantine and Serbian allies who see opportunity in Ottoman chaos. How many empires have learned that individual rulers' fates can destroy institutional legitimacy across vast territories when symbols of power become symbols of defeat? You're entering Constantinople's fever-racked imperial chambers now, where January illness conceals the slow poison that eliminates the Eastern Empire's most independent ruler. 474 AD, and Emperor Leo Werd, who'd freed the Eastern Empire from Germanic influence but alienated powerful military commanders through his reliance on his Saurian allies, dies from what court physicians describe as severe dysentery, though his food taster had shown similar symptoms before dying mysteriously weeks earlier. His death allows return to traditional Germanic military influence under his son-in-law Zeno. The gentle groans of imperial pain that medicines couldn't ease, the soft panic among Isaurian guards who'd protected their patron, the empire's political transformation as news spreads that their independent emperor has fallen to suspicious illness. His elimination removes the ruler, who'd successfully challenged barbarian control over imperial armies, ensuring future emperors would again depend on Germanic military support. The sweet taste of medicine that couldn't cure imperial poisoning, the quiet satisfaction among Gothic commanders who'd waited for this opportunity. The dynasty's continuation under leadership that abandons Leo's anti-Germanic policies. What price do empires pay when rulers who challenge foreign military influence become targets for elimination by the very forces they try to control? You're entering Constantinople's private dining chamber now, where October meals become weapons in the struggle between usurper and legitimate restoration. 610 AD, and Emperor Phocas, who'd gained power through military mutiny, but ruled through terror that made him universally hated, discovers his evening wine tastes strangely metallic moments before Heraclius's agents reveal they've been slowly poisoning him for weeks. His death from accumulated mercury allows smooth transition to legitimate rule and ends 8 years of tyrannical government. The gentle clink of poisoned goblets being set aside forever. The soft prayers of palace servants who'd administered slow death while pretending loyalty. The empire's relief as news spreads that their tormentor has finally succumbed to gradual elimination. His death represents the triumph of patient conspiracy over immediate revolution, showing how unpopular rulers can be eliminated through sustained poisoning campaigns rather than dramatic assassination. The sweet scent of freedom returning to Constantinople's streets. The quiet emergence of competent administrators from hiding, the empire's recovery beginning with this methodical removal of institutional tyranny. How many tyrants have discovered that their greatest enemies work not through dramatic coups, but through patient poisoning that accumulates until no antidote can save them? You're entering Naples' Royal Chapel now, where January incense masks the scent of sacrilegious murder disguised as Holy Sacrament. January 25th, 1494, and King Ferdinand I of Naples, who'd maintained Aragonese control over southern Italy through ruthless suppression of baronial opposition, receives communion from his confessor during morning mass, but the consecrated wine contains poison that kills him within hours. His death opens Naples to French invasion, as Charles VIII claims Angevin rights to the kingdom, beginning the Italian wars that devastate the peninsula for 60 years. The gentle chanting of Latin prayers that accompany royal death. The soft horror among courtiers who realize communion itself has become a weapon. The kingdom's immediate vulnerability as news of royal death reaches French armies already marching south. His son Alfonso II inherits a poisoned chalice, both literal and metaphorical, facing invasion within months, and eventually fleeing to Sicily as French forces occupy the capital. The sweet taste of wine turning bitter with metallic poison, the quiet scandal spreading through Catholic Europe, the dynasty's survival requiring Spanish intervention that transforms Naples into a Habsburg dependency. How many kingdoms have discovered that the holiest moments offer the perfect cover for the most unholy acts of political murder? You're entering Syracuse's royal bathhouse now, where September steam conceals the assassination that eliminates Byzantium's most controversial emperor. 668 AD, and Emperor Constans II, who'd moved the imperial capital from Constantinople to Sicily and alienated both Eastern and Western subjects through his religious and political policies, dies when his chamberlain Andreas strikes him with a soap dish during his evening bath, the murder disguised as accident until conspirators reveal their plot. His death ends the attempt to relocate the Byzantine Empire westward and ensures Constantinople's continued dominance. The gentle splash of bathwater concealing imperial blood, the soft echo of ceramic striking skull in marble chambers, the empire's constitutional crisis, as news spreads that their relocating emperor has fallen to domestic treachery. His elimination removes the ruler who'd tried to transform Byzantium into a Western Mediterranean power, allowing traditional Eastern orientation to resume under his son Constantine IV. The sweet scent of perfumed bath oils masking the smell of death. The quiet celebration among Constantinople factions who'd opposed Western relocation. The dynasty's survival requiring abandonment of imperial policies that had alienated subjects across 2 continents. How many empires have eliminated rulers whose visionary relocations threaten established power centers that prefer traditional arrangements? You find yourself in the Tower of London's Bloody Tower now, where summer darkness swallows the voices of 2 royal children forever. August 1483, and 12-year-old King Edward V and his younger brother Richard lie sleeping in their Tower apartments, when Sir James Tyrrell enters with accomplices carrying pillows that will ensure they never wake again. Their uncle Richard III had grown impatient with the political complications caused by their continued existence as rightful heirs to England's throne. The gentle breathing of innocence about to be silenced, the soft rustle of bedclothes that become funeral shrouds, the kingdom's moral transformation as child murder becomes acceptable political necessity. Their disappearance allows Richard's coronation to proceed without the embarrassment of living rivals, but creates the mystery that haunts his reign and justifies Henry Tudor's later invasion. The sweet scent of summer roses blooming outside tower walls, the quiet horror among servants who discover empty beds, the dynasty's survival, depending on eliminating the very children it was meant to protect and nurture. How many thrones have been secured by the murder of those too young to understand why their royal blood has become their death sentence? You're entering Constantinople's humble imperial quarters now, where August heat carries the scent of a reign ending as mysteriously as it began. 527 AD, and Emperor Justin I, who'd risen from Illyrian peasant to imperial throne through military service, but ruled largely through his nephew Justinian's guidance, dies suddenly from what court physicians describe as infected wound, though palace whispers suggest poison administered by those who preferred more sophisticated leadership. His death allows smooth transition to Justinian's sole rule, the gentle prayers in Latin and Greek echoing through corridors that had witnessed unprecedented social mobility, the soft relief among educated courtiers who'd found peasant mannerisms embarrassing, the empire's intellectual transformation as power passes to more cultured hands. His elimination removes the last emperor of humble origins, ensuring future rulers would emerge from established aristocratic families rather than military ranks. The sweet scent of incense masking medicinal odors, the quiet satisfaction among palace intellectuals who'd waited for this transition, the dynasty's continuation under leadership that prioritizes legal scholarship over military experience. What irony that empires elevate peasants to thrones only to eliminate them when their rustic origins become politically inconvenient. You're entering Rogojno's hunting lodge now, where February cold preserves the blood of Poland's briefly restored monarch, February 8, 1296, and King Przemysł of Poland, who'd reunited much of the kingdom and restored royal dignity after decades of fragmentation, dies during what appears to be a hunting accident arranged by the Margraves of Brandenburg, who coveted his territories. His assassination just 5 months after coronation ends the Piast dynasty's brief restoration and returns Poland to foreign domination. The gentle crackle of lodge fires that couldn't protect royal life, the soft weeping of courtiers who'd hoped for lasting independence, the kingdom's return to German control as Brandenburg forces occupy major cities. His death represents the fragility of medieval restoration projects, showing how external enemies could eliminate inconvenient rulers through carefully staged accidents that avoided international condemnation. The sweet scent of pine forests concealing political murder, the quiet celebration among German nobles who'd opposed Polish independence, the dynasty's extinction opening Poland to centuries of foreign interference that only ends with modern national resurrection. How many restored kingdoms have discovered that independence earned through diplomacy remains vulnerable to neighboring powers who prefer tractable clients? Dear listeners, you're standing in Constantinople's hippodrome now, where September crowds transform imperial arrogance into public spectacle of revenge. September 12, 1185, and 65-year-old Emperor Andronikos III, who'd gained power through popular revolt against aristocratic corruption, but became a tyrant worse than those he'd replaced, faces the fury of the same Constantinople mobs who'd once cheered his reforms. His death comes through public torture lasting 3 days, as citizens take turns beating, mutilating, and humiliating the emperor who'd promised justice but delivered paranoid executions. The gentle roar of crowds finally unleashed against imperial authority, the soft justice of retribution measured in hours of suffering, the empire's cathartic release from years of terror disguised as reform. His reign had begun with promises to protect common people from aristocratic exploitation, but deteriorated into systematic persecution of anyone suspected of disloyalty. The sweet satisfaction of revenge finally achieved, the quiet restoration of traditional imperial protocol, the dynasty's end through popular uprising that proves even successful demagogues cannot escape accountability forever. What transforms liberating heroes into hated tyrants, and when does popular justice become indistinguishable from mob vengeance seeking blood? You find yourself in Buda Castle's royal chambers now, where December darkness conceals the end of Hungary's last independent medieval dynasty. December 9th, 1437, and King Sigismund of Hungary, who'd ruled half of Europe as Holy Roman Emperor and led crusades against Ottoman expansion, dies suddenly after a feast celebrating recent diplomatic victories, his body showing symptoms that court physicians attribute to poison administered by enemies of his Turkish policies. His death without male heir triggers succession disputes that weaken Hungarian resistance to Ottoman conquest. The gentle echo of diplomatic celebration turning to funeral preparation. The soft panic among nobles who realize their kingdom faces renewed Turkish pressure. The empire's eastern defenses crumbling as leadership succession becomes uncertain. His attempts to balance crusading rhetoric with practical accommodation of Ottoman power had created enemies among both war hawks and peace factions, the sweet wine turning bitter with metallic aftertaste, the quiet emergence of rival claimants backed by different European powers, the kingdom's gradual transformation from independent monarchy to Ottoman battleground that climaxes at Mohács. How many Crusader kings have discovered that fighting infidels requires diplomatic flexibility that true believers consider tantamount to heresy? You're entering Constantinople's imperial mausoleum now, where April's silence conceals the most horrific death in Byzantine history. April 9th, 491 AD, and Emperor Zeno, who'd survived multiple usurpation attempts and reunified the Eastern Empire after decades of internal warfare, falls into a catatonic state that court physicians mistake for death, leading to his burial while still alive. His recovery inside the sealed tomb triggers desperate scratching at stone walls that goes unheard until grave robbers discover claw marks and evidence of his slow suffocation. The gentle echo of fingernails scraping marble in absolute darkness, the soft horror of imperial awakening in tomb silence, the empire's constitutional confusion when rumors suggest their buried emperor had lived days beyond his funeral. His death eliminates the last obstacle to Anastasius I's succession, ending the Isaurian dynasty that had provided military leadership during the empire's recovery from barbarian invasions. The sweet incense of burial rites performed for living emperors, the quiet celebration among political enemies who'd waited years for this opportunity, the dynasty's end through medical error that becomes indistinguishable from elaborate assassination. What nightmares exist for rulers who fear not just death, but the possibility of awakening to find themselves already buried and forgotten. You're entering Constantinople's humble palace chambers now, where February cold intensifies the fever that claims Byzantium's most powerless ruler. 1391 AD, and Emperor John V, who'd spent his reign as a puppet controlled by his son Manuel and various foreign powers, but recently attempted to assert independent authority, dies suddenly after drinking medicine prepared by court physicians who'd grown tired of his inconvenient attempts at real governance. His death allows smooth transition to Manuel II's sole rule and eliminates potential complications in Ottoman negotiations. The gentle whisper of political chess pieces being moved around imperial corpse. The soft relief among courtiers who'd struggled with divided authority. The empire's constitutional simplification as news spreads that their complicating emperor has fallen to convenient illness. His elimination removes the last obstacle to streamlined government during crisis negotiations with Bayezid, where ensuring Byzantine survival requires abandoning any pretense of shared imperial authority. The sweet taste of medicine that cures political problems more effectively than physical ailments. The quiet emergence of unified imperial policy. The dynasty's survival requiring elimination of inconvenient family members who threaten diplomatic coherence. How many dying empires have discovered that even puppet rulers become dangerous when they attempt to exercise the authority their titles suggest they should possess? You're riding through Cilician mountains now, where April's sun illuminates the accident that ends Byzantium's most successful military revival. April 8th, 1143, and Emperor John II, who'd restored Byzantine power through 25 years of methodical conquest and diplomatic skill, dies from what appears to be a hunting accident when a poisoned arrow scratches his hand during a boar hunt. His death eliminates the general who'd recovered Anatolia from Turkish control and restored imperial prestige throughout the Mediterranean world. The gentle rustle of mountain wind through pine trees that witnessed imperial death, the soft confusion among courtiers who'd expected decades more of successful campaigning, the empire's strategic momentum stalling as succession passes to his son Manuel without military experience. Some chronicles hint at assassination arranged by enemies of his aggressive policies. Others suggest divine punishment for pride in military achievement, but all agree his death changes Byzantine strategic calculations. The sweet scent of wild herbs that couldn't cure royal poison, the quiet recognition among foreign enemies that opportunity has arrived, the dynasty's continuation under leadership that proves less capable of maintaining territorial gains. What irony that history's most successful generals often meet their end during the peaceful moments between campaigns that defined their greatness. Dear listeners, you're entering Rothsay Castle's cold chambers now, where April hunger becomes the weapon that destroys Scottish royal authority. April 4th, 1406, and King Robert III of Scotland, who'd ruled through physical disability and political weakness while noble factions destroyed royal authority, dies from complications of voluntary starvation triggered by news that his son James has been captured by English pirates while sailing to France for safety. His death represents the complete failure of medieval Scottish monarchy to control aristocratic violence. The gentle lapping of Clyde waters against castle walls, the soft despair of a broken king who'd lost everything, including hope. The kingdom's orphaned condition as news arrives that both king and heir are gone. His decision to stop eating after learning of his son's capture transforms personal grief into political abdication, leaving Scotland without effective royal leadership during the minority of the captured prince. The sweet scent of uneaten food rotting in royal chambers, the quiet triumph of noble families who'd systematically destroyed central authority, the dynasty's survival dependent on English mercy toward a child hostage who represents Scotland's last hope for eventual independence. You're entering Constantinople's darkened palace chambers now, where August heat cannot warm the chill of imperial disgrace and surgical revenge against military failure. August 4th, 1072, and Emperor Romanos IV, captured at Manzikert and ransomed back to Byzantium after promising tribute to the Seljuk Turks, but finding his stepson Michael VII had ruled during his captivity and refused to relinquish power. Faces blinding, ordered by the very family he'd tried to protect through military service. His death from infected eye wounds eliminates the general who'd led the empire's last great eastern offensive, ending hopes of recovering Anatolia from Turkish occupation. The gentle whisper of silk bandages concealing royal mutilation, the soft weeping of veterans who'd followed him into Turkish captivity and witnessed his humiliation, the empire's constitutional crisis as legitimate emperors become political inconveniences to those who'd tasted independent power. His blinding represents the triumph of palace intrigue over military necessity, weakening Byzantine defenses just when Turkish pressure intensifies and threatens the capital itself. The sweet scent of healing herbs that cannot restore imperial sight or dignity. The quiet celebration among court factions who preferred weak rulers to strong generals. What price do empires pay when domestic politics becomes more important than foreign threats in determining imperial succession and military leadership? You're entering Nymphion's imperial palace now, where November honey masks the bitter taste of succession politics in Byzantium's exile court, 1254 AD, and Emperor John III, Ducas Vatatzes, who'd built the Nicene Empire into a power capable of reclaiming Constantinople from Latin crusaders, dies suddenly after consuming his daily portion of medicinal honey, though court physicians notice an unusual metallic aftertaste that suggests deliberate contamination. His death eliminates the most capable Byzantine ruler in exile and triggers succession disputes that weaken Nicene unity. The gentle buzzing of imperial beehives that had provided the fatal sweetness, the soft prayers of courtiers who'd watched their empire's greatest hope fade into mysterious illness, the dynasty's vulnerability as news spreads through Anatolia that their restorer has fallen to palace intrigue. His elimination allows his son Theodore II to inherit a weakened throne, ultimately enabling the Palaiologos usurpation that recaptures Constantinople but abandons John's careful diplomatic policies. The sweet scent of poisoned honey lingering in royal chambers, the quiet emergence of rival court factions, the empire's lost opportunity for systematic reconquest replaced by desperate gambles. How many exiled empires have discovered that their greatest restorers often die just before achieving the victories that would justify decades of patient preparation? Dear listeners, you're entering Constantinople's imperial apartments now, where October madness transforms the purple into golden restraints. October 5th, 578 AD, and Emperor Justin II, who'd begun his reign with promises to restore Roman greatness but descended into complete insanity after military disasters against Persians and Avars, dies while chained to his golden throne to prevent him from harming himself or others during violent fits. His death from exhaustion ends 4 years of regency by his wife Sophia and General Tiberius, allowing formal succession to proceed. The gentle rattle of imperial chains against precious metal, the soft prayers of palace priests who'd witnessed divine punishment for imperial pride, the empire's relief as constitutional order returns after years of madness disguised as imperial authority. His mental collapse had begun with news of military defeats but accelerated into complete disconnection from reality, requiring physical restraint during public ceremonies. The sweet incense masking the smell of imperial incontinence, the quiet emergence of competent administrators from hiding, the dynasty's survival requiring acknowledgement that even divine emperors could lose their minds completely. What transforms confident rulers into chained madmen? And when does imperial dignity become indistinguishable from elaborate imprisonment? You find yourself outside Gibraltar's besieged walls now, where March wind carries both victory and the invisible enemy that claims kings. March 26th, 1350, and King Alfonso XI of Castile, who'd spent his reign unifying Spain through conquest of Muslim territories and was on the verge of taking Gibraltar from Granada, dies suddenly from bubonic plague while conducting the siege that would have completed the Reconquista. His death from the Black Death eliminates medieval Spain's most successful military leader, just as final victory seemed assured. The gentle echo of siege engines falling silent, the soft horror among crusaders who realize pestilence respects no royal blood, the kingdom's strategic momentum lost as succession passes to his 16-year-old son Pedro, who lacks military experience. His death represents the ultimate irony of medieval warfare. External enemies prove less dangerous than invisible diseases that travel with armies. The sweet scent of orange blossoms blooming over plague graves, the quiet celebration in Granada's besieged walls, the dynasty's continuation under leadership that proves incapable of completing the conquest their father had made inevitable. How many kingdoms have discovered that their greatest enemies travel not in enemy armies, but in the very air that surrounds victorious campaigns. You're entering Constantinople's imperial bedchamber now, where December cold mingles with the warmth of betrayal and matrimonial murder. December 11th, 969 AD, and Emperor Nikephoros II. Focus. The White Death of the Saracens, who'd reconquered Crete and Cyprus from Arab control, dies when his wife Theophano and her lover John Tzimiskes lead assassins into his bedroom during the night. His death ends the military revival that had restored Byzantine power in the eastern Mediterranean and Syria. The gentle rustle of silk bed curtains concealing armed murderers, the soft whisper of imperial prayers interrupted by daggers, the empire's moment of vulnerability as news spreads that their greatest general has fallen to domestic treachery. His austere military lifestyle and religious zealotry had alienated the court nobility, who preferred the luxurious emperor that Tzimiskes represented. The sweet perfume of imperial concubines masking the scent of blood, the quiet relief among palace factions who'd opposed military expansion, the dynasty's violent transfer ensuring continuation of eastern campaigns under more diplomatically flexible leadership. What drives empires to murder their most successful generals in the very beds where they should have been safest from all enemies? Hey friends, you're entering Dover Castle's windswept halls now, where October storms mirror the constitutional chaos of disputed succession. October 25th, 1154, and King Stephen of England, who'd seized the throne from his cousin Matilda and fought 19 years of civil war, dies from what court physicians describe as severe stomach illness, though many whisper about poison administered by those eager to end the anarchy through Plantagenet succession. His death allows Henry II's peaceful accession, ending the bloodiest period in English medieval history. The gentle crash of Dover waves against castle foundations, the soft relief among nobles exhausted by decades of civil warfare, the kingdom's desperate need for undisputed royal authority after generations of contested legitimacy. His reign had begun with a coup against female succession, but deteriorated into stalemate that destroyed central government effectiveness. The sweet scent of October roses blooming in neglected royal gardens, the quiet celebration among Angevin supporters who'd waited decades for this moment, the dynasty's end opening England to continental empire that transforms insular kingdom into European power. How many civil wars have ended, not through military victory, but through the simple exhaustion that makes any legitimate succession preferable to continued fighting? Dear listeners, you're entering Hagia Sophia's shadowed nave now, where October candlelight illuminates the price of religious diplomacy in desperate times. October 31st, 1448, and Emperor John VIII Palaiologos, who'd traveled to Florence seeking Catholic military aid against Ottoman siege and agreed to church reunion despite Orthodox opposition, dies suddenly after returning to Constantinople, his body showing signs that court physicians attribute to divine punishment for betraying traditional faith. His death removes the emperor most willing to compromise with Western Christianity for political survival, the gentle echo of Greek and Latin prayers competing in sacred space, the soft weeping of clergy torn between theological correctness and physical survival, the empire's final isolation as Orthodox hardliners reject Catholic alliance, even as Turkish armies surround the city. His brother Constantine inherits a throne stripped of foreign support and domestic unity, ensuring the Byzantine Empire's destruction within 5 years. The sweet incense of Orthodox services resuming traditional forms, the quiet abandonment of union negotiations, the dynasty's theological purity preserved at the cost of political extinction. What price do dying empires pay when religious principle becomes more important than survival in the face of overwhelming enemies? You find yourself in Mistra's hilltop palace now, where spring air carries both Byzantine beauty and the scent of Italian political intrigue, April 12, 1470, and despot Demetrius Palaiologos, brother of the last Byzantine emperor and ruler of the Morea, who'd collaborated with both Turks and Venetians to maintain independence, dies suddenly in his exile after mysterious stomach illness that Italian physicians cannot cure. His death in Venice eliminates the last claimant to Byzantine imperial succession outside Ottoman control. The gentle whisper of Mediterranean wind through palace gardens, the soft prayers in Greek echoing through Italian churches, the empire's ghostly continuation in foreign exile that ends with this suspicious death. His attempts to balance competing powers had made enemies among all factions: Turks who distrusted his independence, Venetians who feared his imperial claims, and Orthodox believers who condemned his religious flexibility. The sweet scent of spring flowers blooming over imperial graves, the quiet satisfaction among Venetian politicians who'd tired of supporting expensive exiles, the dynasty's complete extinction ensuring no future challenges to Ottoman legitimacy in former Byzantine territories. How many exiled rulers have discovered that foreign hospitality becomes deadly when hosts decide that living symbols of lost empires pose more problems than they're worth? You're entering Madrid's royal apartments now, where August heat intensifies the madness that music cannot cure and kingship cannot heal. August 10th, 1759, and King Ferdinand VI of Spain, who'd retreated into complete melancholy after his beloved wife Barbara's death and refused to conduct royal business for over a year, dies from what court physicians describe as profound depression, though some whisper about poison administered by those who needed decisive royal leadership. His death without heir transfers the crown to his half-brother Charles III, ending the direct Spanish Bourbon line. The gentle echo of Farinelli's singing through empty palace corridors. The soft weeping of courtiers who'd watched their king fade into musical obsession. The empire's administrative paralysis finally ending with royal death that restores governmental function. His reign had been marked by peace and prosperity, but his withdrawal from reality after personal loss had created constitutional crisis in a global empire requiring constant royal attention. The sweet melancholy of harpsichord music playing to empty rooms. The quiet relief among ministers who'd governed without royal input. The dynasty's continuation under leadership that prioritizes imperial duty over personal grief. How many kingdoms have learned that even the most successful rulers can be destroyed not by enemies or poison, but by the simple inability to function after losing love? You're entering Constantinople's pleasure gardens now, where November frost kills the flowers that witnessed 3 decades of imperial decadence and dynastic decline. November 11th, 1028, and Emperor Constantine VIII, who'd ruled jointly with his brother Basil II, but devoted himself entirely to pleasure while Basil conquered the Bulgars, dies from what palace physicians describe as painful bladder disease, though court whispers suggest poison administered by nobles disgusted with his hedonistic lifestyle. His death without male heir ends the Macedonian dynasty that had ruled Byzantium for 2 centuries. The gentle sound of pleasure boats rotting in imperial harbors, the soft regret among courtiers who'd enabled decades of royal irresponsibility, the empire's sudden realization that competent government requires more than inherited legitimacy. His reign represented the opposite of his brother's military discipline. Where Basil had expanded the empire through personal sacrifice, Constantine had weakened it through personal indulgence. The sweet perfume of concubines dispersing from empty imperial apartments, the quiet emergence of ambitious generals seeking imperial marriage, the dynasty's end through biological failure that transforms the empire from military machine into prize for competing noble families. Hey friends, If you love these whispered tales exploring how power's fragility echoes through history's shadows, don't forget to subscribe for more stories from royal chambers. Dear listeners, you're entering Lyon's imperial palace now, where August heat carries the scent of civil war and the death of Rome's last teenage emperor. August 25th, 383 AD, and 18-year-old Emperor Gratian, who'd ruled the Western Empire for 8 years, but lost military support through his preference for Hellenic bodyguards over Roman troops, dies when the usurper Magnus Maximus orders his execution after capturing him during flight from Gaul. His death ends the Valentinian dynasty's direct line and begins 5 years of civil war that weakens Roman defenses against barbarian invasion. The gentle clatter of dropped imperial regalia, the soft weeping of Gothic guards who'd served him faithfully, the empire's fragmentation as news reaches Italy that their young Augustus lies dead. His assassination eliminates the last emperor capable of uniting Gaul and Britain under legitimate authority, allowing Maximus to consolidate power before his eventual defeat by Theodosius. The sweet scent of summer roses wilting in abandoned gardens, the quiet celebration among British troops who'd followed Maximus across the Channel, the dynasty's violent end opening the Western Empire to decades of usurpation that culminate in complete collapse. How many teenage emperors have learned that inherited legitimacy cannot survive the loss of military loyalty in times of crisis? You find yourself in Toledo's royal chambers now, where April warmth mingles with the medications that promise healing, but deliver death instead. April 25th, 1295, and King Sancho of Castile, who'd usurped the throne from his nephew Alfonso de la Cerda and spent his reign fighting civil wars while suffering from debilitating gout, dies after taking medicine prepared by his Jewish physician, though many suspect the treatment contained poison administered by enemies of his religious tolerance. His death triggers succession disputes that weaken Castilian resistance to Aragonese expansion. The gentle grinding of medicinal herbs in palace mortars, the soft groans of royal pain that medicines were meant to ease. The kingdom's medical mystery as healing becomes indistinguishable from murder. His attempts to protect Jewish communities from Christian persecution had created enemies among both nobility and clergy who preferred more traditional approaches to religious minorities. The sweet aroma of healing spices masking bitter poison, the quiet emergence of anti-Semitic factions seeking scapegoats, the dynasty's survival requiring abandonment of tolerant policies that had made Sancho politically vulnerable. What irony that kings seeking relief from physical pain often find only the greater agony of political death delivered through medicine. Hey friends, you're entering Constantinople's wine cellars now, where September vintage conceals the murder that ends the Amorian dynasty forever. September 24th, 867 AD, and Emperor Michael III, known as the Drunkard for his legendary alcohol consumption and neglect of imperial duties, dies when his drinking companion and co-emperor Basil the Macedonian stabs him during what appeared to be another routine evening of imperial carousing. His death allows Basil to establish the Macedonian dynasty that rules Byzantium for 3 centuries. The gentle splash of wine mixing with imperial blood, the soft echo of laughter turning to screams in palace corridors, the empire's transformation from decadent court to military resurgence under new leadership. His murder represents the ultimate betrayal of friendship, as Basil had risen from peasant origins to imperial partnership through Michael's drunken favoritism. The sweet fragrance of fermenting grapes that couldn't preserve royal life, the quiet relief among administrators who'd watched the empire stagnate under incompetent leadership, the dynasty's violent end opening Byzantium to its most successful medieval expansion. How many friendships have ended in murder when personal loyalty conflicts with imperial necessity in the pursuit of effective government? You're walking through Montiel's muddy battlefield now, where March rain washes the blood of Castile's most controversial king into Spanish soil. March 23rd, 1369, and King Pedro I of Castile, called the cruel by enemies and the just by supporters, dies when his illegitimate half-brother Enrique stabs him during hand-to-hand combat after their final battle for the crown. His death ends the legitimate Castilian line and establishes the Trastamara dynasty through fraternal murder. The gentle patter of rain on abandoned royal armor, the soft weeping of loyal troops who'd followed their king into hopeless battle, the kingdom's moral transformation as bastardy triumphs over legitimacy through superior force. His reign had been marked by civil war, foreign intervention, and religious persecution that made him numerous enemies despite his administrative competence. The sweet scent of wildflowers blooming over royal graves, the quiet celebration among French allies who'd supported Enrique's rebellion, the dynasty's violent transfer ensuring Spanish alignment with France rather than England in the 100 Years' War. What price do kingdoms pay when legitimate rulers become so hated that bastard brothers represent preferable alternatives to established succession? Dear listeners, you're entering Constantinople's imperial baths now, where April steam conceals the drowning that eliminates an inconvenient husband. April 11th, 1034, and Emperor Romanos III. Argyros, who'd married into the imperial family but proved incompetent in both military campaigns and palace politics, dies when his wife Zoe's agents hold him underwater in the palace bathhouse until he drowns. His death allows Zoe to marry her lover Michael IV and continue ruling through successive husbands. The gentle lapping of warm water against marble walls, the soft struggle of imperial lungs seeking air that will never come. The empire's constitutional flexibility as murder becomes matrimonial policy. His elimination represents the triumph of palace intrigue over military failure, as Zoe preferred husbands who could be controlled rather than generals who might challenge her authority. The sweet scent of bath oils masking the smell of death, the quiet emergence of Michael from hiding, the dynasty's survival through serial marriage that transforms widowhood into imperial strategy. How many empires have discovered that incompetent husbands pose greater threats to powerful wives than foreign enemies ever could? You find yourself on Sauchiburn's Scottish hillside now, where June mist conceals the death that transforms medieval Scotland forever. June 11th, 1488, and King James III of Scotland, who'd fled the battlefield after his nobles rebelled against his preference for low-born favorites and English alliance, dies under mysterious circumstances when someone claiming to be a priest administers last rites with a dagger instead of holy oil. His death allows his 15-year-old son, James IV, to become king under noble control. The gentle whisper of Highland wind through abandoned royal banners, the soft horror among fleeing courtiers who witness regicide disguised as spiritual comfort. The kingdom's transformation as feudal rebellion succeeds through religious deception. His murder eliminates the king who'd tried to modernize Scotland through diplomacy rather than warfare, returning the country to traditional militaristic policies. The sweet scent of summer heather blooming over royal blood, the quiet satisfaction among nobles who'd opposed royal centralization, the dynasty's continuation under leadership that abandons peaceful innovation for aggressive foreign policy. What drives kingdoms to murder kings who choose diplomacy over warfare? And when does modernization become treason in traditional societies. Hey friends, you're entering Constantinople's shadowed throne room now, where September plots extinguish the flame of shared imperial authority. September 22nd, 1408, and Emperor John VII, Palaeologos, who'd ruled jointly with his uncle Manuel II, but gradually accumulated independent power and foreign support, dies suddenly from illness that court physicians cannot explain, occurring just as he'd begun negotiating separate peace with the Ottomans. His death removes the imperial alternative that might have saved Byzantium through accommodation rather than resistance. The gentle flutter of diplomatic correspondence being burned, the soft prayers of eunuchs who'd served two masters, the empire's lost opportunity as pragmatic leadership succumbs to mysterious circumstances. His willingness to accept Ottoman suzerainty in exchange for continued Christian rule had created enemies among both traditionalists who demanded resistance and relatives who feared marginalization. The sweet incense of prayers for imperial souls, the quiet triumph of war factions over peace negotiations, the dynasty's internal conflict ensuring unified opposition to Turkish demands that proves ultimately futile. How many empires have eliminated their own best hope for survival because accommodation with enemies seems less honorable than glorious destruction? You're entering Compiègne's royal halls now, where April silence marks the end of France's most unlikely king. April 10th, 879 AD, and King Louis II, the stammerer, who'd ruled for less than 2 years after his father Charles the Bald's death, but struggled with speech impediments that made royal communication difficult, dies suddenly from what court physicians describe as fever, though some whisper about poison administered by those frustrated with ineffective royal leadership. His death fragments the Carolingian Empire further, as his two young sons divide the kingdom. The gentle echo of halting royal speech in empty corridors, the soft relief among courtiers who'd struggled to understand imperial commands, the empire's linguistic crisis ending with this convenient death. His speech difficulties had made diplomatic negotiations nearly impossible and undermined royal authority in an age when eloquence determined political effectiveness. The sweet scent of spring flowers blooming in neglected royal gardens, the quiet celebration among nobles who'd found royal stammering politically embarrassing, the dynasty's continuation under regency that proves more articulate but less legitimate. What price do kingdoms pay when physical disabilities make effective royal communication impossible in ages that demand eloquent leadership? Dear listeners, you're entering Constantinople's great church now, where December incense mingles with the blood of imperial murder disguised as holy worship. December 25th, 820 AD, and Emperor Leo V the Armenian, who'd saved the empire through military victories against Bulgars but alienated the church through renewed iconoclasm, dies when conspirators led by Michael the Amorian attack him during Christmas morning liturgy in Hagia Sophia. His assassination ends the Syrian dynasty and begins the Amorian period of Byzantine history. The gentle chanting of Christmas prayers interrupted by imperial screams, the soft horror among worshippers who witness regicide in God's house, the empire's theological transformation as iconoclasm dies with its imperial patron. His murder represents the ultimate triumph of religious opposition over military competence, as church factions preferred incompetent Orthodox emperors to successful heretical ones. The sweet frankincense of Christmas celebration masking the metallic scent of blood, the quiet emergence of icon-venerating clergy from hiding, the dynasty's violent end ensuring restoration of traditional religious practices that had been interrupted by imperial theological innovation. How many successful generals have discovered that religious correctness matters more than military victory in determining imperial survival. You find yourself in Foggia's royal castle now, where January cold preserves the moment when Angevin ambitions die with their greatest champion. January 7th, 1285, and King Charles I of Naples, who'd conquered southern Italy, Sicily, and parts of Greece while planning crusades to recover Jerusalem, dies suddenly after drinking wine at a feast celebrating recent military victories, his body showing symptoms that court physicians attribute to poison administered by enemies of his expansionist policies. His death ends. Angevin dreams of Mediterranean empire and triggers Sicilian independence under Aragonese protection. The gentle echo of victory celebrations turning to funeral dirges. The soft panic among French nobles who'd followed their king to Italy. The kingdom's strategic collapse as news spreads that their conqueror has fallen to mysterious illness. His elimination removes the last threat to Byzantine recovery in Greece and ensures Sicilian freedom from French domination through the War of the Sicilian Vespers. The sweet taste of celebration wine turning bitter with poison, the quiet satisfaction among Italian enemies who'd waited years for this opportunity, the dynasty's survival requiring abandonment of imperial ambitions that had made Charles numerous enemies. Dear listeners, you're entering Ravenna's imperial mosaics now, where August heat illuminates the death of Rome's most ineffective Western emperor, August 15th, 423 A.D., and Emperor Honorius, who'd ruled for 29 years while barbarians conquered Gaul, Spain, and Africa, but spent his time raising chickens in his palace gardens, dies suddenly from what court physicians describe as dropsy, though some whisper about poison administered by those desperate for competent leadership. His death without heir ends the Theodosian dynasty in the West and begins the final phase of imperial collapse, the gentle clucking of imperial chickens outliving their master, the soft prayers of courtiers who'd watched an empire crumble under agricultural enthusiasm, the kingdom's surreal transformation as news spreads that their bird-loving emperor has finally joined his feathered friends in death. His reign represented the ultimate disconnect between imperial responsibility and personal interests, as barbarian kingdoms carved up Roman territories while Honorius focused on poultry breeding. The sweet scent of chicken feed scattered in empty palace courtyards, the quiet emergence of ambitious generals seeking imperial recognition, the dynasty's biological end opening the Western Empire to rapid succession of puppet emperors controlled by barbarian warlords. What epitaph exists for emperors who loved chickens more than empires and watched civilizations fall while tending barnyard fowl? You find yourself in Carlisle Castle's stone halls now, where May warmth carries the scent of a kingdom's golden age, ending with royal death. May 24th, 1153, and King David I of Scotland, who'd transformed his kingdom from feudal backwater into European power through church reform and urban development, dies suddenly while inspecting border fortifications, his body showing no obvious cause of death despite court physicians' examinations. His mysterious collapse eliminates Scotland's most successful medieval king and triggers succession disputes that weaken the kingdom for decades. The gentle echo of construction work halting in royal abbeys, the soft confusion among masons who'd built Scotland's first stone castles, the kingdom's developmental momentum stopping with this unexplained royal death. His reign had seen the introduction of continental feudalism, establishment of royal burghs, and massive church building that transformed Scottish society and economy. The sweet scent of fresh mortar and unfinished royal projects, the quiet concern among European allies who'd supported Scottish modernization, the dynasty's continuation under his grandson Malcolm IV, who lacks the political skill to maintain David's achievements. How many kingdoms have lost their greatest architects of progress to deaths so mysterious that even success cannot prevent dynastic decline. You're entering Constantinople's private medical chambers now, where December treatments for imperial epilepsy become the perfect cover for assassination. 1041 AD, and Emperor Michael IV, who'd gained the throne through marriage to Empress Zoe, but suffered from increasingly severe epileptic seizures that made ruling difficult, dies during what appears to be a routine medical treatment when his physician administers mercury-based medicine laced with additional poison. His death allows Zoe to adopt his nephew Michael V as successor. The gentle convulsions that had marked his reign finally falling still. The soft prayers of palace physicians who'd failed to cure imperial illness. The empire's medical mystery as healing becomes indistinguishable from murder. His elimination removes the emperor whose seizures had become politically embarrassing and militarily dangerous during a period requiring decisive leadership. The sweet scent of medicinal herbs masking deadly poison, the quiet satisfaction among courtiers who'd grown tired of epileptic interruptions during state ceremonies, the dynasty's survival through adoption that ensures continued Paphlagonian influence over imperial succession despite biological failure. What vulnerability do rulers face when their medical treatments become opportunities for those who prefer more reliable leadership? You're entering Dundonald Castle's windswept chambers now, where April storms mirror the constitutional chaos of Scotland's aging king whose hands shake too violently to hold either scepter or sword. April 19, 1390, and King Robert II of Scotland, who'd founded the Stuart dynasty but ruled through increasing physical disability as arthritis made royal duties impossible and transformed every state ceremony into painful spectacle, dies from complications of joint disease, though some suspect poison administered by nobles frustrated with his inability to control lawless Highland clans who mock royal weakness. His death triggers regency disputes between his numerous sons from multiple marriages, each claiming superior fitness to rule territories their father could no longer defend. The gentle creaking of arthritic joints that could no longer bear the weight of crown or sword during formal occasions. The soft groans of royal pain that medicines couldn't ease and that made council meetings exercises in endurance. The kingdom's governmental paralysis as effective rule becomes physically impossible for a monarch whose body betrays his royal spirit. His reign had begun with promises to restore royal authority after Bruce's extinction, but deteriorated into noble anarchy as physical incapacity prevented decisive action against rebellious subjects. The sweet scent of pain-relieving herbs that couldn't restore royal mobility or dignity. The quiet power struggles among Stuart princes seeking control of territories. How many kingdoms have learned that even founding dynasties can be destroyed by the simple inability of aging bodies to perform royal duties that require physical strength? You're entering Constantinople's pleasure pavilions now, where January cold cannot cool the imperial passion that consumes empires from within. January 11th, 1055, and Emperor Constantine IX. Monomachos, who'd gained the throne through marriage to Empress Zoe, but devoted himself to his mistress Maria Sclerina rather than imperial duties, dies suddenly from what palace physicians describe as exhaustion from excessive pleasure-seeking, though court whispers suggest poison administered by enemies of his scandalous lifestyle. His death ends the Macedonian dynasty's final phase and opens Byzantium to military emperors. The gentle rustle of silk sheets in abandoned imperial bedchambers, the soft weeping of concubines who'd competed for imperial favor, the empire's moral exhaustion mirroring its emperor's physical collapse from hedonistic excess. His reign had scandalized Constantinople through open adultery, while the empire faced threats from Normans in Italy and Pechenegs on the Danube. the sweet perfume of imperial mistresses dispersing from empty palaces, the quiet relief among military commanders who'd waited for this moment, the dynasty's end through biological failure that transforms the empire from pleasure garden into military camp. What price do empires pay when emperors choose personal pleasure over imperial duty? And when does private vice become public disaster? You find yourself on Denmark's Jutland Peninsula now, where October mist conceals the fall of Scandinavia's last great Viking king. October 25th, 1047, and King Magnus I of Norway and Denmark, who'd united the northern kingdoms and earned the title the Good through just rule and military success, dies suddenly while campaigning against rebellious Danish nobles, his death from mysterious illness eliminating the last hope for permanent Scandinavian unification. His passing without direct heir splits his dual kingdom between Harald Hardrada and Svein Estridsson, triggering decades of warfare. The gentle sound of longships being beached for final time, the soft mourning of Vikings who'd followed their king across northern seas, the kingdom's fragmentation as news spreads that their unifying monarch has fallen to unknown causes. His reign represented the transformation of Viking raiding into Christian kingship, showing how successful adaptation required abandoning traditional warrior culture. The sweet scent of autumn leaves falling over royal graves, the quiet satisfaction among Danish separatists who'd opposed Norwegian rule, the dynasty's survival requiring acceptance that permanent unification had died with its greatest champion. How many dreams of Northern Empire have ended not through military defeat, but through the mysterious deaths that fragment what war had united? Hey friends, you're entering Constantinople's heated throne room now, where June debates about sacred images culminate in imperial death that changes Christian art forever. June 18th, 741 AD, and Emperor Leo III, the Isaurian, who'd saved Byzantium from Arab conquest but divided the empire through his prohibition of religious icons, dies suddenly from what court physicians describe as violent fever, though many attribute his death to divine punishment for destroying sacred art. His passing allows his son, Constantine V, to continue iconoclastic policies with even greater severity. The gentle crackling of icon fires still burning in palace courtyards, the soft prayers of image venerators who'd hidden their treasures, the empire's theological transformation as military success becomes indistinguishable from religious revolution. His reign had begun with desperate defense against Islamic expansion, but evolved into systematic persecution of traditional Christian practices that created internal enemies. The sweet incense of secretly preserved icons hidden in palace walls. The quiet emergence of iconoclastic clergy from hiding. The dynasty's continuation ensuring decades more of religious civil war that weakens Byzantine unity against external threats. What drives successful military emperors to risk internal religious warfare when external enemies already threaten imperial survival from multiple directions? You're riding through Rom's royal forests now, where September hunting becomes the weapon that eliminates France's English-raised king whose foreign mannerisms never quite fit French royal expectations. September 10th, 954, and King Louis IV d'Outre-mer, who'd been raised in English exile and struggled throughout his reign against powerful nobles led by Hugh the Great, who resented his Anglo-Saxon-influenced court etiquette and political methods, dies from injuries sustained during a hunting accident that many suspect was deliberately arranged by enemies of his pro-English policies and foreign administrative practices. His death leaves his young son Lothair under the regency of the very nobles who'd opposed royal authority and preferred French isolation from English influence. the gentle thundering of hooves that couldn't outrun political conspiracy, the soft snap of branches that might have concealed assassins positioned by Hugh the Great's agents, the kingdom's vulnerability as news spreads that their foreign-educated king has fallen to domestic treachery disguised as sporting accident. His attempts to strengthen royal power through English alliance had created enemies among French nobles who preferred weak kings they could control rather than foreign-influenced monarchs who might impose alien governmental systems. The sweet scent of autumn forests that witnessed royal murder, the quiet triumph of aristocratic factions over royal centralization efforts, the dynasty's survival requiring abandonment of foreign support. What fatal disadvantage do exiled kings face when their foreign education makes them perpetual strangers in kingdoms that view outside influence as existential threat to traditional power structures? You're entering Constantinople's fever-racked imperial chambers now, where January heat from burning icons cannot warm the chill of divine retribution. January 20th, 842 AD, and Emperor Theophilos, who'd continued his father's iconoclastic policies with fanatic zeal and persecuted icon venerators through torture and execution, dies after months of dysentery that court physicians interpret as God's judgment on imperial heresy. His death allows his wife, Theodora, to restore icon veneration and end 117 years of religious civil war. The gentle whisper of prayers for imperial soul mixed with curses from victims' families, the soft relief among hidden icon venerators who'd suffered years of persecution, the empire's theological exhaustion finally ending with this convenient royal death. His reign had seen the most severe persecution of traditional Christian art in Byzantine history, creating martyrs whose suffering demanded vengeance. The sweet incense of restored icons returning to church altars, the quiet celebration among Orthodox monks emerging from hiding, the dynasty's survival requiring complete reversal of policies that had defined imperial authority for over a century. What justice exists when religious persecutors die in agony that their victims interpret as divine punishment for destroying sacred art? You find yourself in Madrigalejo's modest inn now, where January simplicity conceals the death that reshapes European balance forever. January 23, 1516, and King Ferdinand II of Aragon, who'd unified Spain through marriage to Isabella of Castile and established Spanish dominance in Italy through shrewd diplomacy, dies suddenly while traveling to meet his grandson Charles. His death from mysterious fever, eliminating Europe's most successful political manipulator. His passing allows Habsburg inheritance of Spanish kingdoms and transforms European power dynamics. The gentle echo of diplomatic correspondence that will never be answered. The soft prayers of courtiers who'd watched their master outmaneuver French and Ottoman enemies. The continent's strategic transformation as news spreads that Spain's architect has fallen to unknown illness. His death represents the end of purely Spanish imperial ambitions as inheritance passes to Charles V, who rules German and Flemish territories alongside Iberian kingdoms. The sweet scent of Spanish oranges ripening in abandoned royal gardens, the quiet recognition among European powers that the diplomatic balance has shifted, the dynasty's biological continuation ensuring Habsburg control over territories Ferdinand had spent decades acquiring. You're entering Constantinople's council chambers now, where May heat intensifies the political fever that consumes the Eastern Empire's weakest ruler. 408 AD, and Emperor Arcadius, who'd ruled for 13 years as a puppet controlled by various court eunuchs and generals, while the Western Empire collapsed, dies suddenly from what court physicians describe as dropsy, though many suspect poison administered by those who'd grown tired of his complete inability to make independent decisions. His death transfers power to his 7-year-old son Theodosius II under new regency. The gentle whisper of puppet strings being cut as imperial authority passes to new handlers. The soft relief among administrators who'd struggled with an emperor incapable of decisive action. The empire's governmental transformation as incompetent adult rule gives way to organized minority regency. His elimination removes the last obstacle to efficient bureaucratic government, allowing capable ministers to rule without the interference of an ineffective emperor who'd consistently chosen the worst possible advisors. The sweet scent of freedom from imperial incompetence. The quiet emergence of professional administrators from behind palace curtains. The dynasty's survival through childhood succession that proves more effective than adult imperial leadership. How many empires have discovered that child emperors, guided by competent regents, provide better government than adult rulers controlled by incompetent favorites? You find yourself on Stiklestad's Norwegian battlefield now, where July's sun illuminates the death that transforms Viking raiders into Christian martyrs. July 29, 1030, and King Olaf II of Norway, who'd spent his reign forcing Christian conversion on pagan subjects and fighting Danish attempts to reconquer his kingdom, dies during battle against his own rebellious nobles who'd allied with Canute the Great. His death in combat eliminates Norwegian independence and allows Danish rule. But mysterious events at his tomb create the cult that makes him Saint Olaf. The gentle sound of battle axes falling silent as news spreads that their Christian king has fallen. The soft prayers of converts who'd followed Olaf's religious reforms. The kingdom's spiritual transformation as military defeat becomes religious victory through posthumous miracles. His death represents the ultimate irony of medieval politics. Failed kings often achieve greater influence as saints than they ever wielded as living rulers. The sweet scent of pilgrimage flowers placed on royal graves, the quiet emergence of Norwegian identity through religious rather than political means. The dynasty's spiritual survival, ensuring eventual restoration through Olaf's son Magnus, who inherits both throne and sanctity. How many failed kings have discovered that death in righteous causes creates more lasting power than successful life through compromise? Hey friends, you're entering Constantinople's imperial library now, where November manuscripts conceal the death of Byzantium's most learned emperor. November 9th, 959 AD, and Emperor Constantine VII, Porphyrogenitus, who'd ruled for 16 years after eliminating his co-emperor Romanos II and devoted himself to writing the definitive works on imperial ceremony and administration, dies suddenly from what court physicians describe as stomach illness, though many suspect poison administered by enemies of his scholarly approach to government. His death eliminates the emperor who'd systematically recorded Byzantine statecraft for posterity while neglecting contemporary military threats. The gentle scratching of imperial quills that will write no more governmental treatises. The soft rustling of parchment pages describing ceremonies that will never again be performed. The empire's intellectual loss as news spreads that their scholar emperor has fallen to mysterious circumstances. His reign represented the triumph of academic theory over practical politics, showing how intellectual emperors often understand government better than they can practice it. The sweet scent of illuminated manuscripts drying in empty scriptoriums. The quiet relief among military commanders who'd opposed scholarly rule. The dynasty's continuation under leadership that prioritizes battlefield victory over bureaucratic documentation. What legacy exists for emperors who write definitive guides to government but cannot prevent their own mysterious deaths from ending their reigns? Dear listeners, you're entering Krakow's cathedral now, where April prayers cannot wash the stain of regicide from Poland's royal hands. April 11th, 1079, and King Bolesław II, the Bold of Poland, who'd restored Polish power through military victories against Kievan Rus and Bohemia, but alienated the Church through conflicts with Bishop Stanislaus, dies in exile after murdering the saint during Mass, an act that triggers noble rebellion and forces royal flight. His death ends the first restoration of Polish monarchy and fragments the kingdom for 2 centuries. The gentle echo of sword-striking altar stone, the soft horror among worshippers who witness regicide in God's house, the kingdom's moral collapse as news spreads that their king has murdered a saint during divine service. His assassination of Stanislaus represents the ultimate violation of medieval religious law, proving that even successful military kings cannot survive the spiritual consequences of attacking church authority. The sweet incense of prayers for murdered saints, the quiet emergence of noble factions seeking vengeance, the dynasty's spiritual exile ensuring that restoration requires centuries of penance before legitimacy returns. How many kingdoms have learned that murdering saints creates curses that no amount of military success can overcome or political skill can manage? You're entering Constantinople's fever-racked palace now, where May heat intensifies the illness that eliminates Byzantium's designated heir. May 24th, 641 AD, and Heraclius Constantine, who'd ruled jointly with his father Heraclius for 9 years and was expected to continue the dynasty that had saved Byzantium from Persian conquest, dies suddenly from tuberculosis just months after inheriting sole imperial authority, his death triggering succession disputes that weaken the empire during Arab expansion. His brief reign eliminates the experienced leadership needed to coordinate resistance against Islamic conquest. The gentle coughing that had echoed through palace corridors finally falling silent. The soft panic among administrators who'd planned for decades of continuity. The empire's strategic vulnerability as news reaches Arab armies that Byzantine leadership has collapsed. His death represents the ultimate failure of dynastic planning, showing how biological inheritance cannot guarantee political survival when external threats require immediate decisive action. The sweet scent of medicinal herbs that couldn't cure imperial lungs, the quiet emergence of competing claimants seeking power, the dynasty's fragmentation allowing Arab conquest of Syria and Egypt that permanently weakens Byzantine territorial control. What price do empires pay when carefully planned successions are destroyed by simple diseases that respect neither royal blood nor strategic necessity? You're finding yourself in Leon's royal castle now, where June feasts conceal the poison that ends Spanish Christian expansion for an entire generation of reconquest efforts. June 30th, 1109, and King Afonso VI of Leon and Castile, who'd conquered Toledo from Muslim rule and pushed Christian reconquest deep into the Iberian Peninsula while earning the title Emperor of all Spain, dies suddenly after a meal celebrating recent military victories against Almoravid forces, his body showing symptoms that court physicians attribute to poison administered by enemies of his aggressive policies against Islamic kingdoms. His death eliminates the most successful Christian conqueror and allows Almoravid revival under Yusuf ibn Tashfin that reverses many territorial gains. The gentle clatter of celebration dishes being cleared from royal tables, the soft prayers of Mozarabs who'd welcomed Christian liberation from Islamic rule, the kingdom's strategic momentum lost as news spreads that their conqueror has fallen to mysterious illness during apparent triumph. His elimination removes the one king capable of coordinating Christian resistance against North African reinforcements, allowing Muslim reconquest of territories that had seemed permanently secured for Christianity. the sweet taste of victory wine turning bitter with poison, the quiet satisfaction among Islamic agents who'd waited years for this opportunity to eliminate their most dangerous enemy, the dynasty's survival requiring acceptance that reconquest must proceed more slowly under less capable leadership that lacks Afonso's strategic vision. How many crusading kings have discovered that their greatest victories often make them the most attractive targets for enemies seeking strategic reversals through assassination? Hey friends, you're entering Constantinople's storm-racked palace now, where July lightning strikes with divine precision at Byzantine fiscal policy. July 9th, 518 AD, and Emperor Anastasius I, who'd ruled for 27 years and restored imperial finances through efficient taxation, but alienated both Orthodox Christians through religious policy and circus factions through entertainment restrictions, dies suddenly from what court chroniclers describe as divine lightning strike during a thunderstorm. His death ends the most financially successful reign in late imperial history. The gentle rumble of thunder that had echoed through palace chambers before the fatal flash, the soft awe among courtiers who'd witnessed apparent divine intervention, the empire's fiscal transformation as news spreads that their tax-collecting emperor has been eliminated by heavenly fire. His death represents the ultimate triumph of popular religion over administrative efficiency, showing how theological correctness often matters more than governmental competence. The sweet scent of rain washing imperial courtyards clean, the quiet celebration among Orthodox clergy who'd opposed his religious policies, the dynasty's end through apparent divine judgment that allows Justinus to restore traditional Christian practices while abandoning fiscal responsibility. What justice exists when efficient emperors are eliminated by lightning that subjects interpret as divine punishment for theological innovation? Dear listeners, you're entering Coimbra's royal chambers now, where March winds carry the scent of a kingdom's golden age ending with royal illness. March 26th, 1211, and King Sancho Puig of Portugal, who'd expanded the kingdom southward through conquest of Muslim territories and established royal authority over rebellious nobles, dies suddenly from what court physicians describe as unknown fever, though many suspect poison administered by enemies of his aggressive military policies. His death slows Portuguese reconquest and triggers succession disputes with his brother, the gentle echo of military orders that will never again mobilize royal armies, the soft prayers of settlers who'd followed their king into conquered territories, the kingdom's expansion halting as news spreads that their conqueror has fallen to mysterious circumstances. His elimination removes the driving force behind Portuguese territorial growth, allowing his successor to focus on consolidation rather than continued conquest of Islamic strongholds. The sweet scent of orange groves planted in newly conquered lands, the quiet concern among Portuguese settlers isolated in enemy territory, the dynasty's continuation under leadership that proves less capable of maintaining the military momentum their father had established through decades of successful campaigning. How many expanding kingdoms have lost their territorial ambitions to the mysterious deaths that eliminate the kings who made conquest possible? You find yourself in Constantinople's quarantined palace now, where September disease demonstrates that even imperial blood cannot escape universal mortality. September 14th, 685 AD, and Emperor Constantine IV, who'd defended Constantinople against 7 years of Arab siege and established Byzantine naval supremacy through Greek fire, dies from bubonic plague that spreads through the capital despite imperial attempts at quarantine. His death from pestilence represents the ultimate irony. The emperor who'd saved Byzantium from human enemies succumbs to invisible biological warfare. The gentle prayers of palace physicians who'd failed to protect imperial life, the soft weeping of courtiers who'd watched disease succeed where Arab armies had failed, the empire's biological vulnerability finally overwhelming political and military strength. His death demonstrates how even the most successful defensive emperors remain helpless against diseases that respect neither imperial dignity nor strategic necessity. The sweet incense burning throughout plague-racked Constantinople, the quiet emergence of his son, Justinian II, from protective isolation, the dynasty's survival through biological luck rather than political skill during an age when epidemic disease poses greater threats than foreign conquest. What hubris leads emperors to believe they can defend empires against human enemies while remaining vulnerable to microscopic invaders that make no distinction between imperial and common blood? You're entering Seville's conquered mosque now, where May prayers in Latin replace centuries of Islamic worship as Christian reconquest reaches its climax. May 30th, 1252, and King Ferdinand III of Castile and Leon, who'd united the Spanish kingdoms and conquered Córdoba and Seville from Muslim rule, while earning canonization through his pious treatment of conquered populations, dies suddenly from fever contracted during his final campaign, his death eliminating the most successful Crusader king just as he planned to invade North Africa. His passing ends the heroic age of Spanish reconquest and establishes the territorial boundaries that define medieval Iberia. The gentle transformation of minarets into bell towers, the soft prayers of Muslim populations accepting Christian rule, the kingdom's military momentum lost as news spreads that their saint king has fallen to natural illness rather than enemy action. His death represents the ultimate triumph of biological reality over imperial ambition, showing how even the most pious conquerors cannot overcome the diseases that travel with armies. The sweet scent of incense replacing Islamic prayers with Christian liturgy, the quiet recognition that North African conquest must wait for future generations, the dynasty's continuation under leadership that inherits territorial unity but lacks the spiritual authority that had made Ferdinand's conquests seem divinely blessed. Hey friends, if you've journeyed with us through these 100 tales of power's fragility and poison's persistence, don't forget to subscribe as we continue exploring history's whispered secrets and the strange endurance of suspicion that surrounds every throne.